Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. May I please ask that we all rise to sing the national anthem and the AU anthem. Thank you so much. You may please take your seats. Okay, so I'm looking around, profusely looking around the room, looking for smiles. I can see some smiles here in the front, at the back, maybe not so much. I don't know if it's the winter morning that's making us so serious, but I want to encourage you to just relax and smile. We are here for a very, very good reason. I want to acknowledge everyone who's here, all the important people in the room. I want to acknowledge the Honorable Minister, Verna Sinombo, the Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Trade. I also want to acknowledge Mr. Paulus Noah, the Anti-Corruption Commissioner. I want to acknowledge all our guests. I want to acknowledge Mr. BC Uirap, the President of the NCCI, as well as all the directors that are joining him from the NCCI this morning. I want to acknowledge the leadership at the Ministry of Home Affairs who have kindly availed this beautiful room to us today. I want to acknowledge all the businessmen and women that are here with us this morning. Please don't look so serious. You're scaring me. I'm very, very honest. You are literally scaring me. Thank you for those smiles, by the way, for those that have smiled. My name is Helena Motseng, and my assignment this morning is very simple. I am to make sure that the program is facilitated, and I will make sure that I try to do that as effectively as possible and that I stick to the time. Before I start any engagement, I come from an organization where safety is a very, very interesting culture that we've developed over the years. We always want to make sure that we remind each other to be safe in whatever area of our lives. So I want to remind us this morning just to be safe through this winter. I know it's cold, it's time for coughs and sneezes and all of these things. Please make sure that you have a shot, flu shot. And also, please keep warm. Obviously, it's not the best winter weather. I came from Accra, Ghana yesterday, where it was really lovely and warm and humid and into the very, very cold Windhoek. So please take care of yourself. COVID is still not gone. It's still with us. For those who have long COVID issues, please just take care of yourself. And that's just for me trying to remind us to be safe this morning. The purpose for our engagement this morning is to discuss ethical behavior in business. And I think it's a really, really important topic and a really important discussion to be had continuously in our country. I want to thank those that have put this together because it's a really, really critical time for us to reflect on where we have come from, where we are, and where we want to go in that space. I don't want to dwell too much on my experiences this morning. I just want to start with the program and call to the fourth already Mr. Paulus Noah, the Director General of the ACC, to come and address us, welcome us this morning and formally address us. Can we please put our hands together for him?
All right, thank you very much, Director of Proceedings. Honorable Werner Sinibo, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Trade and Industry, my own colleague, Advocate Erna van der Merwe, Deputy Director General of ACC, Mr. Tilve Silongo, ACC's Executive Director, Miss Charity Muya, did I say it? She's on the way. Okay, I recognize her in her absence. She's the Chief Executive Officer of NCCI. I also recognize all other Chief Executive Officers present. I as well recognize the eminent speakers who will serve as panelists during this seminar, some of them. Mr. Denny Meyer, SMS Compete, and he is the chairperson of Cluster 4. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Mr. Stevie Galloway, chairperson, Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. Dr. Esther Kali, is she here? She's not here. Okay, I was informed that she was supposed to be also part of the proceedings. She's the CEO of Leseho Group. Dr. Leake Hangala, Non-Executive Director, Hangala Group. Mr. Biziwirap, NCCI President, and also the Chief Executive Officer of Namibia Airports Company. All heads of business and private bodies present, distinguished invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. I'm so happy that I'm here this morning to welcome you to this significant seminar on ethical behaviors in business sector. That is very, very important. And the hosting of this event is crucial as it drives our robust efforts of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan of 2021 to 2024 to jointly fight corruption and promote good governance through ethical behaviors in both public and private sector, because that is the way Namibia has to go. And this strategy was approved by Cabinet at its meeting on the 9th of December 2021. It was subsequently launched by the Prime Minister, Right Honorable Sarah Kugongerwa Amadila, on the 16th of March 2022. And the strategy was developed primarily for all sectors of the Namibian society to align their business and administrative programs towards ethical standards and the fight against corruption. And this national policy or strategy resonates with regional and global protocols such as the SADC Protocol Against Corruption, African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, and the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, of which Namibia is a signatory. Namibia has signed and ratified all these regional and global legal instruments on the fight against corruption. So we have no reason why we should not align our programs, align our policies, and make Namibia an example to the rest of the world in terms of fighting corruption and making this country a corrupt-free country. And this strategy has 8 strategic objectives, informing the activities under the strategy, of which, and this is also important, strategic objective number 5 looks at to prevent corruption in the private sector. That is one of the 8 strategic objectives of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan, to prevent corruption in the private sector. Because it's not enough to prevent corruption in the public sector if, equally so, we do not prevent corruption in the private sector. This is the reason why the Anti-Corruption Commission and Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry find it appropriate to convene the seminar for private institutions and business representatives to share insights, discuss, and reiterate the importance of upholding integrity and ethical business conduct in Namibia. This is critical since poor ethical standards and corruption compromise potential investment opportunity and economic prosperity. And I do not know whether there's anyone who do not want investment in this country. I don't know whether there's anyone who do not want Namibia to prosper in terms of economic growth. Private sector is the driving force for economic development in a system which is built on sound economic policy and good corporate governance. It is the private sector that needs to drive. Government can create conducive environment for investment, but at the end of the day, if we do not have a robust private sector that is driving behind the steering wheel, then we will make no progress. That's a reality. And it is my considered submission that more needs to be done to maintain business integrity, especially that Namibia has become a focus for potential business investment by multinational companies following the discovery of oil and gas, in addition to other existing minerals. And while stating this, I also want to recognize the representative of Shell Namibia, the country representative, Mr. Eduardo Rodriguez. He's also here. Mr. Rodriguez, where are you? Okay, please stand up so that everybody can see you. You can see Namibia is making a hard way. It's making a hard way. The multinational companies want to come to Namibia, and when they come here, they should know what are the policies of this country in terms of investment and in terms of fighting corruption, so that they toe the line. They don't come and do something different from what the policies of this country dictates to. Thank you very much. Shell is welcome to Namibia, to do business in Namibia, to invest in Namibia, to comply with the policies of economic developments in this country, and also empower our people. Empower our people. We have many people on the street. I think the Honorable Deputy Minister who is with us here know even much better about the concern I'm expressing. Thank you very much. Most welcome. All right, therefore, the seminar is held under the theme, Building a Culture of Integrity, Collaborative Solutions for a Corrupt-Free Sector, with an objective to foster an ethical-driven environment and a culture of collective action in combating corruption in the business community. Corruption is a disease, ladies and gentlemen, which, if allowed to deepen its roots in the system, attacks on the basic principles of good corporate governance. It is therefore crucial that the business community must articulate its commitment to transparent business activities. Policies, either in the public or private sector, must give meaning and content to national anti-corruption strategy. That way, we shall all make Namibia a center of business attraction. The truth is that there has not been in the history of mankind a successful fight against corruption where private sector has not played a pivotal role. And that is the reality in Namibia as well. If we wanted to succeed in our drive to fight against corruption in this country, we cannot leave behind the private sector. Business entities are critical stakeholders to building a fortified governance system free of corruption. I want therefore to use this opportunity to categorically welcome and thank Honorable Verna Sinimbo for being with us this morning to grace this seminar. I also profoundly welcome the key business personality who responded positively to our invitation to attend this seminar and serve as panelists. Your positive response to being part of this milestone is indeed a demonstration of more united nation, advocating for a common voice and marching in one direction. That is demonstrating that we are all together and we are moving in one direction. Equally so, I welcome everybody present here. Your presence gives positive impact to the very purpose of the seminar and the output. Having time to put your daily activities aside to honor our call cannot be taken for granted, and we deeply appreciate your presence, all of you. Once again, I'm honored this morning to welcome you all to this seminar. Let us engage and share ideas on how best to enhance integrity, ethics, and transparency to insulate corporate institutions against unethical business conduct. The responsibility centrally lies with all of us to resist, to reject, and to report corruption and unethical conduct in the Republic of Namibia. And I welcome you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Noah, for those welcoming remarks. I'm sure that has also put everybody in the room, as well as everybody who's watching us on national TV, as well as the digital platforms, have got an idea of why we are here together today. Thank you so much for putting into context why it's important for the private sector to form part of conversations that look at business ethics and for us to collectively find ways to chart our way forward. This afternoon, we'll not just have the formal speeches, but we'll also have a segment where we will have a panel discussion where our panelists will be unpacking the discussion of today under different topics. And I encourage you to participate in those panel discussions because our voices also have meaning. I also want to just share that for those of us who might want to know where our ablution facilities are as we proceed with our morning's proceedings, for the gentlemen, it's just out the door to my right at the back of the store, and for the ladies, the exit would be that way, and you would find the ablution facilities there. So Namibia has been ranked the 8th out of 54 countries in the 2022 Mo Ibrahim Corruption Index and 59th out of 180 countries in 2023's Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International, placing it in the fourth place in Southern Africa, which means obviously that a discussion like this is critical. I'm sure that most of us, especially when you travel outside of Namibia and you get to speak about Namibia, one of the things that we do not want to talk about is corruption and how it impacts our country and how it impacts our lives. So we all have a role to play in ensuring that the discussions around Namibia and around the issue of corruption become something that we can find pride in, not just within ourselves in the country, but also as we travel. I have now, sorry, I just need to get my program. There are a few changes on our program, but I'll announce them as they come. Next up, I want to call to the podium our keynote speaker, Honorable Verna Sinimbo, the Deputy Minister of Ministry of Trade, to come and share her remarks. Can we put our hands together for the Minister?
Can you see me? I have a problem every time. Some of these podiums are not doing me justice. Or maybe a little bit of this, I don't know. Is it okay? Thank you so much. Some of these slides. Director of Ceremonies, Ms. Helena Motseng. Allow me to start saying, save our nation, oh God, save us, we pray. I think that is what brought us here this morning, because our country, we believe in God, and we also believe that whatever we ask God will save us from a corrupt, or to have a corrupt-free country. Mr. Paulus Noah, the Director General of Anti-Corruption Commission. Mr. Telvas Shilongo, Executive Director of ICC. It took me time to memorize this name. I hope I didn't disappoint. Ms. Charity Muya, in her absence. All Executive Directors, heads of other government and public entities present, all heads of private sectors, all heads of civil society institutions, all officials and representatives, business personalities, members of the media, very good morning. Very good morning. I know we are talking about, is it Dr. Paulus Noah that you are so scared of everybody or what? He's so friendly, very, very friendly, you know? So let us relax, it's our meeting. I'm so delighted this morning to be in your presence today at this significant ethical behavior in business seminar. In Namibia, we have long recognized the vital role of enjoying peace and democratic stability in economic and social progression. However, corruption is a crime that permeates various sectors of society. The impact of corruption is far-reaching, affecting economic growth, public trust in private and public institutions, and the overall well-being of the citizens. Furthermore, corruption as an economic crime of choice also manifests itself in the form of dishonesty, extortion, embezzlement, bribes, kickbacks, trading in influence, or in many other related criminal offenses, when undertaken by a person or entity in position of authority to acquire or elicit benefits. In this context, this gathering, therefore, is a testament of our collective intent to safeguard the democracy and stability that we enjoy today in Namibia. It is therefore imperative for us all to be aware of the danger of corruption and its ramifications of decay, if not guarded against. Ladies and gentlemen, as we may all be aware, private businesses in Namibia have considerable influence and resources that can be used to drive positive change in the country. These include employment and investment opportunities. Therefore, the importance of ethical behavior in business cannot be overstated. It serves as the cornerstone upon which trust, sustainability, and prosperity are built. As individuals, organizations, societies, we have a shared responsibility to uphold the highest standards of integrity in all our dealings. It is through such principled conducts that we can foster a culture of trust, transparency, and accountability. Today's seminar, held under the theme, Building a Culture of Integrity, Collaborative Solutions for a Corrupt-Free Sector, is thus timely. The theme underscores the power of collaboration in addressing the minus of corruption. By working together, pooling our resources, and sharing our expertise, we can discuss solutions that will help root out corruption in our midst. It is only through a concerted effort involving stakeholders, such as yourselves, from all sectors that we can hope to achieve lasting change and building a future free from the scourge of corruption. It cannot be a one-man show. On the national front, allow me to discuss government efforts on measures pertinent to this context. As a country, we acknowledge that transparency alone is not enough and must be accompanied by robust scrutiny and accountability mechanisms. To this end, we have implemented reforms in our public procurement system to enhance transparency and reduce opportunities for corruption. The Public Procurement Act of 2015 introduced stringent measures to combat corrupt practices. Our country also has passed the Access to Information Act, Act number 8 of 2022, to promote transparency, accountability, good governance, and access to information. The law requires public and private entities to make information available to the public where appropriate. In an effort to better address transnational organized crime, our country, during the year 2023, amended various of its national laws and passed new laws. Amongst the laws that were amended are the Companies Act, Act number 28 of 2004, and the Close Cooperation Act, Act number 26 of 1988. The companies and close cooperation legislations were amended to make it mandatory for companies and close cooperation to keep and maintain registers of beneficial owners of such entities. The new Trust Administration Act, Act number 11 of 2023, was passed to bring transparency, accountability, and clarity to the management and operations of trust. Amongst other things, places an obligation on the Masters of Higher Court and on trustees to keep and maintain registers of beneficial owners. A Virtual Asset Act, Act number 10 of 2023, was also passed to provide, among other things, for the licensing and regulation of virtual asset services providers to ensure consumer protection and prevent or mitigate the risk of money laundering and financing of terrorism activities. The Prevention of Organized Crime Act, Act number 29 of 2004, was also amended to extend the powers of Namibia's Anti-Corruption Commission, including investigating money laundering as a standalone offense. Meanwhile, Namibia is making strides towards its national goals and becoming a global competitive producer and exporter of green hydrogen and its byproducts, as outlined in the HPP2 Economic Advancement Pillar. It is therefore incumbent upon us to provide fair opportunities for all citizens. And I mean fair opportunities for all citizens, which can only be achieved if we maintain, or by maintaining integrity in energy in all other economic projects. Director of Ceremonies, distinguished guests, corruption is a multifaceted issue that often takes center stage in discussions involving government officials. However, it is essential to recognize that the private sector plays a significant role in either perpetuating or combating crime or corruption. The collusion between private enterprises and corrupt practices cannot be ignored, and we must hold ourselves accountable in the fight against corruption. Furthermore, we must acknowledge that corruption can manifest within the private sectors itself, both among businesses and individuals. This internal corruption poses a significant threat to our economy and society as a whole. As leaders in the private sector, we have a duty to uphold the highest ethical standards and actively work towards eradicating corrupt practices within our organizations. Companies have the ability to implement anti-corruption policies and procedures that can also help us to prevent unethical practices and promote transparency in business dealings. Despite the clear benefits of private sector involving in anti-corruption efforts, businesses may face challenges when taking a stand against corruption. Some companies may encounter resistance to change within their organizations, with employees reluctant to adhere to new anti-corruption policies and procedures. Additionally, there may be a lack of awareness or understanding of the issue of corruption, with some businesses failing to recognize the importance of addressing this issue. In some cases, businesses may also be hesitant to speak out against corruption due to potential risks such as retaliation or damage of their reputation. Furthermore, I urge each of one of us here today, to engage in open and honest discussions on how we can close the gaps that allows corruption to thrive. Let us not turn a blind eye to the challenges that we face, but instead come together to provide actionable recommendations that will drive real change. So this seminar is your seminar. We really expect you to give all the good advices and guidance. Another important step is to promote transparency and accountability in business practices. Companies can engage in open dialogue with stakeholders, disclose information about their operations, and adhere to international best practices for ethical business conduct. By fostering a culture of transparency, businesses can help a more trustworthy and sustainable business environment. Furthermore, the private sector can support government initiative and anti-corruption agencies by collaborating on anti-corruption campaigns, sharing information on the corrupt activities, and advocating for policies reforms that strengthen anti-corruption efforts. By working together with other stakeholders, businesses can amplify their impact in the fight against corruption. You are a very, very important stakeholder. By working together, the private sector and government can create a transparent and accountable environment that benefits everyone. We mustn't work in isolation. Ladies and gentlemen, this seminar will also include a panel discussion, as it was already alluded to earlier. that aims to foster a value-driven environment within organizations and highlights the importance of collective action in combating corruption in Namibia's private sector. As we are going to engage in discussions, share best practices, and explore new avenues for collaboration, let us reaffirm our dedication to upholding ethical standards, promoting integrity, and combating corruption in all its forms. Together, we have the power to shape a future where businesses operate ethically, society thrives, and opportunity abound for all. Without a doubt, this event serves as a pivotal platform in our collective journey towards achieving strategic objective 5, preventing corruption in the private sector, as outlined in Cluster 4's responsibility within the National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan. I was informed that Cabinet approved the strategy and it was launched on the 16th of May, 2022 in Windhoek. They deserve a round of applause. Director of Proceedings. In closing, I urge each one of us to embrace the ethos of integrity, champions the values of ethical behavior, and seize the opportunity to be agents of positive change in our respective spheres. Let us tread the path of collaboration, upholding the principles of honesty and transparency, and build a future where integrity reigns supreme. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Can we please put our hands together once more for our Minister? When I started off our engagement this morning, I reminded us of a culture of safety that we observe in our business. I work for the diamond industry in Namibia for a company called the Namibia Diamond Trading Company. And I'm an exceptionally proud employee of that organization. And one of the reasons that I'm exceptionally proud is because we spend a lot of time and energy investing in the developing and encouraging the right kind of culture in our business. A culture of safety, for example, so much so that I start every engagement or every opportunity that I get with a safety moment, whether that safety moment reflects on how we behave on our roads or whether it just reminds us to take our flu shots when we need to. I'm sharing that to say that, again, this is an opportunity for us to embed the right kind of culture in our organization when it comes to corruption. To remind ourselves that if this boat sinks, that we all sink in it together, and that some will not sink more than others, we will all sink together. And that we have an obligation to our country and to our people to make sure that we thrive. So let's collaborate, as pointed out by our minister. Let's collaborate in the campaigns that are put forward by the Anti-Corruption Commission and other entities that do similar work. Let's ensure that our policies find alignment with the works and the efforts that are being made by these organizations. Let's make sure that we remind each other on a day-to-day basis, whenever we start our meetings and our engagements, on behavior that is really not benefiting any of us, and discuss the kind of behavior that we want to see amongst each other. I was sitting here, Honorable Minister, thinking about what you were saying, that someone once actually made a joke saying that even at a wedding there's corruption. So if you don't know someone in the kitchen, then maybe you will wait longer. If you don't know the person at the bar, maybe you won't get your drink as fast. So Corruption is not just in our entities. It's a behavior that we need to move away from. And we need to catch ourselves when we so easily fall trapped to that kind of behavior, that kind of culture. I don't want to labor the point. I think we have very, very esteemed speakers this morning that will shed more light on the topic. So I want to call to the fore Mr. Steve Galloway. Mr. Galloway is the chairperson of the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance, an organization that aims to inculcate, to promote good corporate governance in our entities. For him to come and do a presentation to us on his views on how we are able to do that. I must just mention that we've had a slight change on our program. We were meant to have a little break, but we are going to move forward, Mr. Galloway, and call you up into the fire, and we'll have our break right after that. I'm happy to say that after that we'll also have the panel discussion. I know that there are viewers that are watching us, particularly on the digital platforms. Please don't feel shy. Engage with the audience here today. Post your questions, and we'll try as best as we can to make sure that they find their way to the panelists that are discussing the issues that are being discussed. I personally know, Mr. Noah, that when I walk out of here, I will definitely hold myself to a higher standard, even on the small little things like who do I know in the kitchen and who do I not know in the kitchen, because I really, really want to be part of the change that the Honorable Minister was talking about. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for Mr. Galloway? I've now unplugged everything here. Just quickly plug it back for you. Okay. Beyond this, I don't know.
Ellen? Yes. You're going to have to change again.
Okay.
The presentation is not.
Thank you. So for the people who were sitting there just saying, please, I want to have a break, I want to go to the bathroom, I want to make a call, your prayers have been answered. We're going to take a short break while we get everything ready for Mr. Galloway's presentation after that. Just a reminder, the bathroom for the ladies that way, the bathroom for the gentlemen this way. Please enjoy your corruption-free break, and then we will reassemble in exactly 10 minutes after this. Thank you so much.
during the World Economic Forum in Harare at the Mikos Hotel. Remember when Minister of Finance then was Roland Mbumba, now the nation's president. But I better censor some of those things out. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Galloway actually needs little introduction. Steve was the first director or head of the Namibia Investment Center after Namibia attained its nationhood. Very first. So he had to lay the foundation, which later was built on by those who followed. He really was known for that, promoting the new nation as an investment destination. Steve then left the public sector and went into the private sector. He joined one of the financial services group. I dare not say the name of that banking group because the other banks might hold it against me. And after building that, in fact, he was at the time, as I recall, working with Liaki and Gala with the introduction of the second mobile cellular service in the country. Remember, he was involved in that. Since then, Steve has been called to serve on numerous boards, both in the public sector and in the state-owned enterprise sector. And I don't know how he does it, but he's also had time, set aside time to mentor his nephews after the unfortunate passing of their father, Steve's brother, in their charcoal business. And Steve has a deep love for this country. And where's Eduardo? Eduardo, he shares a love of cycling with you. You want to do the Desert Dash? He actually did a cycling from, I think, the southern part to the northern part of the country a few years ago. And I think the purpose was to spotlight on men's health cancer. Was that not so, Steve, at the time? I think that was. So, ladies and gentlemen, the leadership of the Anti-Corruption Commission, it is my pleasure to once again introduce you to this amazing person who's done so much for his country. Please put your hands together. Thank you. We had to bring him out of semi-retirement. Huh?
Thank you, Danny. You're very kind. My former colleague, the CEO of MTC, said, do they know that you are tech illiterate and that you never wear a tie? I'm actually a very simple person, and I very seldom wear a tie, so feel honored that I am here with a tie. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister Sinimbo, thank you very much for your kind words and for staying on through the technical issues that we've had here. I think you set the scene very well. DG, Mr. Paulus Noah, thank you very much for the session. I thought this was going to be a small, intimate session at the Anti-Corruption Commission, so I really praise you for opening it up, because I think that's the spirit of transparency. Deputy DG, Ms. Anna van der Merwe, thank you very much. Deputy DG, rather. ED, Mr. Tilvas Shilongo, thank you so much. Captains of Industry, I'm not going to mention you by name. A few of my former bosses are here. I won't mention them by name, but I think it's an amazing venue, this, and I was very glad to come into what is a magnificent building in my first visit here. And I'm told that some of the processes that are going on in this building, namely passport issuance, are more efficient than any private sector process that we've seen. And I've said to some of my colleagues in the private sector, go and see what they're doing right there, because it's obviously something that's working and really can be set the standard for public sector. The focus today, I've been asked to speak on the private sector role or strategies for building a culture of transparency and integrity in the private sector. But as we all know, and I hope you're going to be able to see, because the other technology issue was that this screen is not on. So please feel free to move across there if you can't see. Some of the slides are quite detailed. So, as you all know, it's a tripartite arrangement. It's not something that the private sector can do in isolation. It really involves the government at the apex of all of this, and all the government institutions at the apex. And the private sector can only do what the environment allows it to do. I'm going to focus very much on the private sector, and I'm going to refer to civil society because I think it's that triangle that's important. And if we don't get all three sides of the triangle sorted, we're in trouble. So I'm going to focus on the private sector, but I'm also going to bring in very quickly the policy environment that we all operate in, and make some fairly frank suggestions on that policy environment. Danny mentioned that I was in government at the beginning, at independence, and it's quite disappointing that some of those same debates around policy are still being waged now, and I think it's time that the three parties got together and solved some of those issues so that we can really move forward. Nangula's not here, but I share Nangula's pain in having been in that investment center 30 years ago, and she's facing some of the same challenges now. So let's move in then, and the topics are going to be setting the scene with definitions. What is corporate governance? What is corporate citizenship? And what is this thing that we call the healthy company? Because if we don't have healthy companies with transparency and real ethics in those companies, then of course we're on the wrong track. And the state of governance in Namibia is very important. It's not just corporate governance. It's political governance, it's economic governance. It's all those factors that really create that ecosystem. And then I'm going to come to some practical strategies for transparency and integrity, mainly in the private sector, but I'm going to talk about the public sector and public enterprises as well. So let's just set the scene. Anybody who's been in corporate governance over the years will know that the Cadbury Corporate Governance Code in the UK, and this is about 40 years ago. I'm giving my age away, and only Liaki and Danny would remember these things. But the Cadbury Code was a very formal code of the first sort of corporate governance code, and it referred to the systems by which organizations are directed, governed, and controlled. And you can see it's very mechanistic. It's systems, tick boxes, etc., and it served its purpose, I suppose, at the time. But we've moved on from that. So the OECD codes were more progressive, I would suggest. The set of relationships, so we went from systems to relationships between the company, directors, shareholders, and other stakeholders. So those are the relationships that we have between boards, shareholders, etc. And that's also meaningful, but we suggest that the outcomes-based framework, which is so well defined in King 4, and if you've been going through corporate governance, there have been 4 kings. And this is the great Mervyn King, who's an African and who has really led the field in community-based governance. In Africa, we call it Ubuntu. Other parts of the world, they call it other things. And this definition of governance, corporate governance, from King 4 resonates with us at the Institute of Corporate Governance. And that is the exercise of effective and ethical leadership. Effective and ethical leadership by the governing body, and they don't say board, governing body. That's any organization, any church group, school group, etc., the governing body, towards the achievement of the following governance outcomes. So we've gone from systems to relationships to outcomes, and it's simple. The outcomes are ethical culture, there you see ethical again, effective control, legitimacy, and good performance. And I like to swing it around because if you don't have legitimacy, you don't have anything. So I like to start with the L, legitimacy, ethical culture, effective control, and performance. So LEAP without an A, if you remember that. Because the governing body and the organization that it represents has to be legitimate. If you don't have a legitimate structure, you might as well not bother with the other outcomes. So those are the 4 outcomes, and I remind you of those from time to time. So that's Corporate Governance 101. We like the outcomes-based King 4 governance. Corporate citizenship has been referred to by many different acronyms. The broadest one, I suppose, is corporate social responsibility. Everybody knows that one. In the boards that I serve on, I've always tried to move to corporate social investment because it's investment in the social and economic fabric of the country. You might not have a return on that investment today, but over 20 years you should have a return on that, and it really is investing in the country's future as well as your own. Socially responsible investing is another term. Impact investing is a term that came from the United States, and it's been misinterpreted a little bit, and it's sort of used synonymously now with SRI and CSI. But we've moved quite quickly into this space of environmental social governance, the famous ESGs. And I'll talk a bit about ESGs because whether we like it or not, we are being told or asked to do a whole lot of things under the ESG acronym. And I'll make some comments on that. So all of these acronyms, and there are others, represent, in the Institute of Corporate Governance's view, the corporate citizenship framework that we have to really consider as private sector and as public sector. So if we take that back to the codes that we're familiar with, NAM code is the Namibian code, and King 4 is the sort of final version of the King series, if you like. NAM code is pretty much King 3. And in South Africa, and to some extent in Namibia, we've moved to this King 4 code, outcomes-based code. And whether we're talking NAM code or King 4 or ISO 37000, and ISO 37000 is the sort of internationalization of the King 4 code, a Southern African originated code that builds on Ubuntu and communities and stakeholders and is becoming an international code. Mervyn King, we regard as the leading proponent of corporate governance in the world, and it's quite a significant thing that he emanated out of Southern Africa. So all of these codes have as their sort of core investing in the well-being of society, of the economy, and of the natural environment. And NAM code says it, King 4 says it, and ISO 37000 says it. Now, we're going to deviate a little bit here because there are a number of thought leaders that have, with Mervyn King, that have developed the sort of frameworks that we talk about here. And I'm going to just go through what I call setting the bar. The latest book that captures this very well is the one called The Healthy Company, written by Mervyn King and Lee Roberts, and that came out during COVID. And it's a simple guideline as to what are the things that you should be doing, whether in a private company, a family company, a public company, a school board, a church board, etc., to capture this outcomes-based governance. And that's a very helpful book. The second one, also from an African, is How Boards Work. And this was a young Zambian lady who was thrown in, an incredibly talented young lady, who was thrown in to international boards. And she wrote this book as a guideline of how you really navigate the tough atmosphere and turbulence in boards. And I can tell you from a lot of experience, it is tough sometimes. So Dambisa Moyo wrote this amazing book, and it's a very hands-on practical guide. All of the other authors that I have there are Africans, and I'll just go with the exception of The Ethical Capitalist. And when one talks about capitalism, there's some cynical views that capitalism can never be ethical. And this particular company was a very interesting one for me, because this guy, Julian Richer, set up a very successful music company in the UK. And his view was that unless you really become part of the social and economic fabric of the country, you don't do what you should be doing as a capitalist. And I'll come back to that. All of the other authors here are thought leaders from Southern Africa. And skipping down to Let Africa Lead and Attuned Leadership, Liaki and some of the older colleagues will remember Roel Khoza, who came to Namibia in 1996 when we hosted the World Economic Forum. And he spoke to us then on Let Africa Lead. And he said it's this model of community spirit, which we call Ubuntu, which can guide governance in corporates in Africa, and for that matter in the world. And he wrote those two books, Let Africa Lead and Attuned Leadership. Ironically, Danny, he was the chairman of that same banking group that I worked for. And when he wrote the book, Let Africa Lead, in fact, both those books, he called, and this was in 2006, 10 years after he spoke it, I think, he called the state capture in South Africa. And that same banking group, who we won't mention, fired him as the chairman because they said he was a reputational risk. But in 2007, he called state capture in South Africa. And to me, he's one of the greatest leaders we've ever seen in the Southern African region. His successor is the guy who's written the books Lift As You Rise and Behold the Turtle. And Lift As You Rise, as you might imagine, is don't go it alone, take everybody with you. And this is a title that he got from his grandmother. And his grandmother, sitting around the fire, said, "You're doing well, Bonang, but don't leave others behind." And that was the title of his book. The other one was the other one was Behold the Turtle. Not so obvious, maybe. And his grandmother's message to him there was, have you ever seen a turtle making progress when its neck is not stuck out? So her message to him was, when you go out there, be bold and tell it like it is. Don't just go with the flow. Tell it like it is. And those are those two books. The others are closer to home, Invigorating Ubuntu Through Water. And I think water is the next cause of war. So we've got to listen to that and really listen to the Ubuntu community leadership around water. And then our very own governance of public enterprises by Namibia, a very good book. So those are our sort of frameworks that we look at. And I'll just flash through them quickly. The healthy company, the ethical capitalist, which I've mentioned, how to make business work better for society. And that's the crux. Business mustn't be there just for the shareholders. It must be there for all the stakeholders and for society. And I think it's worth just going through this. This is the only non-African thought leader, but I thought this was important. He says, capitalism has lost its way. Every week brings fresh news stories about businesses exploiting their staff, avoiding their taxes, and ripping off their customers. Every week, public anger at the system grows. Now one of Britain's foremost entrepreneurs intervenes to make the case for putting business back firmly in the service of society and setting out a new path to a kinder, fairer form of capitalism. And that really is Ubuntu as well, as told by a Brit. So this kinder, fairer form of capitalism is, and he's drawing on 4 decades here, he argues that ethically run businesses are invariably more efficient, more motivated, and more innovative than those that care only about the bottom line. I think we see that in Namibia. He uncovers the simple tools that the best leaders use to make their businesses fair, revealing how others can follow suit. And he also delves into the big questions that modern capitalism has to answer if it is to survive and thrive. So this idea of capitalism isn't negative. If it can be used positively for society, it's a great force. So that's Dambiso's wonderful book. This is the Ubuntu in Water, and this is Bonang Mohali. By the way, Bonang is the chambers present here might look at this. Bonang was the guy who set up Business Leadership South Africa. And that was an overarching body that operated with lots of chambers as the sort of voice of business to government, if you like. And as his book says, Behold the Turtle, he doesn't hold back. He tells the president exactly what's going wrong in the country, and they do this as an organization, and he's respected. He, by the way, gives a lot of his bravery. He gives credit to Roel Khoza, who was his mentor. So this really is a great example, and I think in the wake of the election result in South Africa, one of the good things that's going to come out is that the business alliances are strong there under leadership of people like this. So I think there's going to be some very positive outcomes from South Africa. So what is it then with all of these benchmarks and all of these thought leaders that we can crystallize as being what we say ethics and integrity is? Because that's the core of all of our corporate governance. And I love the very simple quote from Thuli Madonsela. We had her speaking at our business ethics conference in Swakopmund 2 years ago. And there are lots of academic sort of definitions of ethics. And she said, you know what it is? It's simply what your grandmother told you around the fire, like Bonang's grandmother told him. And what your grandchildren will be proud of, your children and your grandchildren will be proud of when they hear what you did. And, you know, she's just crystallized the whole concept so aptly in an African context. And integrity, to me, this definition resonates very well. It's simply doing what you know is right, not sometimes, always, even when no one is watching. And if you have integrity on every board that you serve on and everybody operating like that, you'll be in a good space. All right, taking it to an international context then, we found this book and we've used this book in various fora. And this was an interesting book written by North American researchers called Firms of Endearment. And they went around, there are many books about successful corporates, good to great and all of those. But this one resonated because it was Firms of Endearment, how world-class companies profit from passion and purpose, not from making profit, but how they do from passion and purpose. Sustainable success over decades. It's not good enough to just do it for 5 or 10 years. And the examples quoted there were companies like Tata, IKEA, Southwest Airlines, Patagonia, not relevant to us, but those were companies that were regarded as rare and authentic firms acting in powerfully positive ways that stakeholders recognize, value, admire, and even love. So those iconic companies that people simply follow no matter what. Hopefully not no matter what, but because it's important that civil society keeps them honest forever. So they make the world better by the way they do business, and the world responds. So it's that aspirational company that we want to get to. And my question in leaving this section is, are there Namibian firms that really live up to that Firms of Endearment? Are there firms that you can think of, private sector or public sector, that really stand out as those Firms of Endearment that make our world a better place and get response from civil society and everybody else? All right, so I'm going to leave you with that. And now I'm going to run through very fast the state of governance in Namibia, because as I said, it cannot be in isolation. It must be within the context of the ecosystem that we're talking about. So I'm going to run through this very fast, and this really is a prompt to our discussion. There are many topics here which I'm not going to talk about, but it's really a prompt. So how is it the governance framework? I served on the Africa Peer Review National Governing Council, and there's a report just out which I'll refer to. And I like the way the APRM has sort of framed governance. And it's not just, obviously, political governance or economic governance or corporate governance. It's all of them together that really set the scene for the socio-economic development solutions. And importantly, at the bottom, it's how this whole governance framework affects current and future generations. This is a multi-generational thing, and whatever we do now has an impact going forward. So that framework of APRM I like. I like it more than our own NDPs and HPPs and so on, because there we put a governance pillar, which is pillar 1, and then we seem to sort of move into the other areas and sometimes forget about the governance. So I like the Africa Peer Review governance framework. But coming to Namibia, of course, we've started out very well. Our constitution is heralded around the world. Article 95.1, of course, sets the scene for us really looking after the ecosystems, the ecological processes, biological diversity, etc., for the benefit of all Namibians. And that's the crux, now and in the future. So we started out very well. Our framework is solid. The constitutional democratic political platform is very solid. Our NDPs, our HPPs all have this strong pillar of governance, all very intentional and very powerful. Our Companies Act, which has just been tweaked a little bit, as the Minister mentioned, is a solid base. Our PEGA Act is okay. Some issues with implementation. Our NAM code is in place. King 4 has now been authorized, if you like, in 2018. And interesting that the NAM code 10 years ago said the following: we need a fundamental change to the way directors and companies organize their business. 10 years ago. We were moving then from a shareholder-focused governance framework, those systems and relationships, etc., to this real outcomes-based, where NAM Code called us, private sector, look at the fundamental change in the way we do business. Sustainability, I'll talk about a little bit later, and that really is a whole new dimension, how we report on sustainability. I'll come to that. So the key legislation that we put in place after independence, and I've just highlighted a few, as they pertain to resources, and the Foreign Investment Act that Danny was talking about when I actually joined the Investment Centre in '92, and I found an act in place which was a very simple act, but it simply said foreign investors are treated the same as Namibians, which was oversimplification. And in '93, we amended the act because Leaki had gone and set up a Mineral Prospecting Act, which I was part of in '92, which quite rightly, drawing from the Constitution, said that Namibians can be treated differently in respect of natural resources. So that act, under number 3 there, already said Namibians can have claims, etc. The Foreign Act, Mr. Rodriguez, you'll be amazed that it was set up in 1991. And that's the framework that you will operate under. Hopefully it will be advanced a little bit. The point I'm making here is that very quickly our leaders set up very strong regulatory framework, which was an incredible platform for the country to develop on. So everything was looking very good right up until the Environmental Management Act of 2007, a strong framework. Something happened a bit later, and that was in the licensing practices. And I'll be as frank as I can here without being rude. Something happened, and I don't know what it is. About 14 years ago, we started somehow bending over backwards to give mineral licenses, oil and gas licenses, and fishing licenses on much more beneficial terms to selected groups of people. And it might have been well-intentioned, but it had some fairly negative fallout. And I'm not going to dwell on this too much now, because we're going to get into that in the discussion. But it really reduced Namibia's competitiveness. The Fraser Institute in the mining sector has slipped and slipped and slipped, and we really need to get it back there. In oil and gas, now that we've found oil and gas, we've got to be very, very sure that that environment, that licensing environment, is at the highest global level, and that we really negotiate the resource rents for the benefit of the country and all its people. Fishing, we know what happened there. So there's some sad faces there, I'm afraid, and these are the issues we need to discuss in more detail. Just to show you that I'm not just speaking from the top of my head, we've done a lot of homework on this, and something happened in 2011 when we started bringing in policies that weren't always investor-friendly. And this debate continues all the time. We're not going to bend over backwards just to please the investor. We have to find a middle ground where the investor is happy and the people are happy, and the state is happy. And all of these things from 2011, from the announcement of strategic minerals, Epangelo, taxation changes, TESEF, NEF, EPL, interests, ownership by the state, etc., have been a little bit worrying that they've created a strong level of ministerial discretion, which creates uncertainty with investors, some transparency gaps, and some negative behavior from both the private sector and the public sector. And this really has led into all of the debates that we've been having in the newspapers, etc., around resource nationalism. What should the state own and what should the resource rent be? All of these debates. And I'm not going to sort of draw out these debates now. They're all valid issues. The beneficiation debate, the local content, the PDN policies, which are entrenched in our constitution. But all of this has major impact on how Namibia goes forward as a competitive investment destination and how we negotiate with foreign investors. So I'm just highlighting this from the Institute of Corporate Governance point of view, that these issues all require debate and all require solutions, and hopefully we can shake hands and get to something that is middle ground and that's acceptable to everybody. Mining, of course, excuse me. I don't think there's anybody who doubts that mining has been the engine of growth of this country. There's some who say that mining is a sunset industry and that we must now move on to green hydrogen and to oil and gas, etc. Our view in the Institute of Corporate Governance and in the Chamber of Mines, where I serve as an honorary life member, is that mining is mature but has huge upside. And if you look at the engine around these cogs, where only 2% of employment is in mining, about 10% of the country leverages off mining, 15% of the GDP, but 30% of the corporate tax, and 50% of the export earnings. And if you can leverage these multipliers into the hydrocarbons area, into oil and gas, and into synthetic fuels, green hydrogen, then we've got a number of engines that are going to drive this economy. And the synergies between those areas is huge. And that really is the focus of where our policy frameworks need to focus on now if we're going to really take this economy to a different level. So that by way of context, if you like. Because if we get it wrong, then we're going into the resource curse, resource-rich countries that don't leverage their benefits properly, and the people get poorer. We can get the Dutch disease if we were to delink from the rand. That's our mitigant so far, and we can have the same disadvantages of other countries who had Dutch disease. All right, now I'm going to flash through and just show where we are in terms of international perceptions of Namibia. And the top ones are fine. We heard this morning about Transparency Index. We're okay. The Mo Ibrahim Index, we're somewhere up near the top. Human development, good and bad. Gini coefficient, not so good. World Economic Forum competitiveness down there. And the concerning thing is that the resource areas we're assessed as not being that well, that competitive. The rankings, World Economic Forum, the top ones are wonderful. We're in the top third, and that creates a great platform for us to really position Namibia as a competitive country. The bottom ones, we're in the bottom third, and we seem to not to be in the middle third anywhere. And those are very worrying. Business registration, hiring foreign labor, overall rating 100 out of 140, not good enough. We really have to push those up. And I wish Nangula was here, because I hope she would agree with me that the sort of high-level takeouts is Namibia is a stable democracy, dominant ruling party. Maybe after this weekend in South Africa, some are questioning that dominant. But I think it's a generally accepted practice that Namibia has been consistent and stable and good. We're middle income, but very skewed wealth distribution, strong resource endowment, but suboptimal governance of natural resources, great infrastructure, but average to average and unequal social infrastructure, of course, and then good governance frameworks and policies, but not that great implementation. All right, so let's get back to what we really can control. NAM Code and the King Codes are in place and are good, healthy companies. I would argue that we have a lot of those. Transparency and integrity in place. Firms of endearment is the question I asked. Subsidiaries of global and regional firms. This is an interesting one. We've really analyzed the difference in corporate governance and in ESG between a company that is embedded in this country and is part of the social fabric and a company that might be embedded but talks to a head office somewhere else. And we've looked at that. And then we've put in public enterprises just as a comparator. All right, so we've talked about NAM codes. I'll skip through this. This is the core in NAM Code and King about sustainability, Ubuntu, moral values, and these are the core drivers of anything that we do in corporates. So let's try and answer the question then. Does Namibia have these healthy companies, these ones that are driven by passion and purpose, not just profit, investing in the social fabric of the country, making a difference? And I've taken the liberty here, we have it in ICG, of saying that we've had those companies for a while. CDM, before it was NAMDEB, then NAMDEB and Deb Marine, they've done that for 100 years. Rossing has done it for 48 years. So we've had those companies that I think are recognized. We've got new companies, Orongo Cement, B2 Gold, we've got the chairman of B2 Gold sitting here, Dundee. Those are also companies that embraced the social responsibilities and backlogs and did a whole lot of work. We've got the family companies, Papkowitz's, O&L's, and Dongo, etc. I would argue those are probably firms of endearment that are really embedded in this country. Capricorn Group, I think so. Bank Windhoek, Gondwana, I declare my conflict for both Gondwana and Rossing, by the way. I think those are companies that are really doing good stuff. If we look at the landscape of these companies that have a head office somewhere else and have an operation here, and I think they are different. I've worked in some of them. So the banks, those three banks are South African banks with great operations here. The question that you ask is, can they be as embedded in the social fabric and the solutions of the country as a real Namibian company? The same with the insurance companies, the same with the auditing companies. They're the mining companies again. I've already named some of them as probably those firms of endearment. The oil companies, these are downstream. We're not seeing the upstream yet, and hopefully they come in here soon. And then the Botswana-based companies. Those are Botswana head office companies, Letshego, Choppies, and Fernmart. So the issue here is, can these companies that have what we call dual corporate governance, they're reporting through their head office infrastructure somewhere else to a different tune, can they really be these firms of endearment? And the answer that we give is yes, they can. B2 Gold has done it, Rossing has done it, NAMDEB, Deb Marine, etc. So they can. What about public enterprises? And I wasn't asked to talk about public, but you know, it's good to have a comparison. And our general take is that these are relatively poor contributions to corporate citizenship in general, as a consequence of two things. Poor financial state, and we know that public enterprises don't, and a lot of them don't make profits, so it's hard to become those firms of endearment, or lack of recognition by government structures that PEs need to play a stronger public role. And by their very definition, they need to play a stronger role, or sometimes both of those. And I think there are some good examples of good corporate citizens, GIPF, MTC, NamPower, DBN, NamDea, Alyssa's here, and Namport. So I think we're starting to get there, but it's generally been behind the curve in public enterprises. And we find that there's a very strong correlation between corporate governance and corporate citizenship. They go together. The Minister of Public Enterprise put out that number, 1.2% ROE on shareholder to the shareholder. That's a return on equity. You know, it's a very low number, and I don't know how realistic it is. What we don't know is the return to the public of a public enterprise, and we've got to have some metrics to do that. But our conclusion there is public enterprises can certainly do do better. Some are doing okay, but in general, that needs to be better. So let me end off with some real practical measures for transparency and integrity. And I'm doing it in 3 boxes, if you like. Starting on the right, the APRM National Program of Action. This was the report which our colleagues from Africa in the APRM configuration, and I was part of that council, have come up with to say these are the things that we think you can do better in Namibia from African colleagues. It's much better to have it from them than from the EU or from the World Bank or from any of those people. Then I'll go to the ESG frameworks, which are really overwhelming us at the moment, and then I'll go back to the governance codes, which we have some control over. All right, so the APRM, this is the economic governance pillar, if you like, of APRM. And what they say, and I was very glad to see the Minister of Mines last night in social media quoting some of this, and the first thing they say is we need a reassessment of the resource governance and licensing framework and the resource rents. So we've got a sovereign wealth fund we're setting up. In this report, a formula is suggested as to how we fund the sovereign wealth fund. What percentage of this royalty and that tax, et cetera, et cetera. We're not seeing that coming out of government. And we really recommend that we bed that in, embed that so that any future minister isn't under pressure to allocate money, that it is programmed. Secondly, a progressive and competitive governance framework and policies. We go straight to the oil and gas, hydrogen, energy frameworks. It's incredibly important that we get those properly embedded quickly. State asset register, of course, important. Assessment of state assets in relation to returns. And then, it's an interesting, you might laugh, removal of or ease of bureaucratic processes for employment permits and tourist visas. We've done exactly the opposite. We've gone and we've said we're going to ask every visitor to this country to have a visa. And, you know, maybe it's justified. I think we could have done it differently, softer. So the program of action under corporate governance, very briefly, adoption and implementation of best practices in corporate governance. We've been talking about that, including ESG. Develop a compliance code for PEGA. I think PEGA is a very good act, but I don't think it's being properly implemented. Develop a database for screening of potential directors and capacitate them. That is doing very well, and I must commend the Ministry of Public Enterprises for actually being extremely deliberate in this. And if I can quote Transnamib, NamPower, and NamCor, those 3 boards have been announced very recently, and these really are good boards. I would suggest that that is better practice in the public sector than we're doing in the private sector, where we're actually going out and deliberately advertising and getting the right skills onto boards with the right people on boards. And I think the private sector can learn from the public sector in that respect. Improve transparency and independence of director appointments. That's happening. And then, of course, in your space, ensuring ethical conduct in organizations, capacitate and enhance the independence of the ACC, the Attorney General's Office, and so on. We all know that you're completely under-resourced, and I think that has to happen quickly so that you set that framework for the private sector to follow. So that's very positive. Organizations to treat shareholders fairly and equitably. There's this whole issue of minority protections. Corporate governance advocacy is very important. Integrate informal sector into supply chains. It's not good enough just to have the big companies there. We've got to have informal sector, SMEs. Then very importantly, a strong recommendation that we should sign the Extractive Industries Transparency Index, especially now that we've got oil and gas. But in the mineral sector, it's also important. The ESG frameworks are very complicated, and all I'm going to highlight for you is that there are now 2 global bodies that are driving these ESG frameworks. They're both global north bodies, unfortunately. The one is the International Sustainability Standards Board, which is implementing IFRS regulations S1, S2, S3, very complicated. And then we've got the European Financial Advisory Reporting Group, which has got a different set. And on all the boards that I've served on, I feel that we're being overwhelmed by these global north standards, which by definition are dominated by climate and carbon metrics, etc. We need to fight for our S, our social metrics, and our governance metrics. And those last two comments there is that we really need to get through this duality of corporate governance that's coming us from the global north and ESG templates that are coming at us, and the companies that are split between a head office somewhere else and an operation here. Those companies are getting confused between these different templates. All right, so to final slides. Outcomes-based governance codes is the way to go. We've moved from King 3 to King 4. Our recommendation is that we move from NAM code to NAM code 2, which would reflect a King 4 type of environment of outcomes-based, or an ISO 37000, which would be the international equivalent of that. We recommend that very strongly. King 3 moved to King 4 because of a few major changes in the world dynamics, and this is the crux of it. What was happening in the world is we were moving from financial capitalism and from shareholder-centric governance to inclusive capitalism, which included all the 6 capitals, not just financial, but human, intellectual, social, relationship, environmental, and natural capital. And we started accounting for all of these 6 capitals, not just for the financial capital. Importantly, King 4 did that, and NAMCO to some extent. The second move was from short-term capital markets, and anybody who operates in the stock exchanges knows what those are. And we drive share prices of companies through all sorts of ways, and those are not sustainable. And the move to long-term sustainable capital with real accounting for the good and bad you do in the 6 capitals or in the ESG framework, that was a second driver. And the third one was from siloed reporting, where you can just report your financials, to this integrated reporting of the whole value chain. And the ESG is developing that as well. So that was what really moved. In Namibia, we would argue 3 additional changes. And this is my last slide. So we're arguing that we must move to outcomes-based governance, NAMCO 2 or ISO 37000, because of 3 things that we need to do in Namibia. We need to move from an assumption that government drives the economy. And I think that's been stated this morning already. We must move to a partnership approach, leverage and really use the state assets that we have in a better way with private sector partnering with the state. That will bring in more FDI, and those partnerships and leadership alliances, which the chambers and civil society must drive. Chambers really need to bring their their members together, and I would still recommend that we have an overarching business leadership type of forum that really drives that process. The second additional change in Namibia is that policy uncertainty that I've described, and we'll go into the debate, really needs to be brought into a much more consultative approach, where civil society and private sector come together and really together form pro-growth, pro-equity strategies, again anchored by chambers and by civil society organizations, which at the moment, in our view, are too fragmented. We need to pool those forces together. And the final one is our recommendation that we've made before, that to move from NAM code, which is okay, but very much systems tick box approach, to a much more outcomes-based approach, NAM code 2 or ISO 37000, over the next year or 2, and start implementing it even before those frameworks are in place. Some changes are needed to the Companies Act as well. And I would suggest that if we can move the whole business sector, including public entities, into this new outcomes-based governance approach, we will have succeeded in creating transparency, in creating integrity, and in creating healthy companies which will drive this economy to a different level. And we would love our new companies that are coming in to address the big opportunities and challenges to fit into that framework, as well as into your global framework that you might be doing already. But you're operating in Namibia, and I think the Namibian context is critically important to you, and we need to rely on you to tell us what's been done well elsewhere as well, so that we can really bring the best examples. I've spoken longer than I intended, but thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Galloway, for that insightful presentation. I'm sure there was a takeaway for everyone of something that you have said here this morning. And I think it was perfectly positioned to prepare us for the next segment of our engagement this morning. The next segment of our engagement is really the discussion, the panel discussion. And I think this is an opportunity where we will hear more voices around the topic, but also probably hear a little bit more from the floor in terms of your views, your opinions, and some of the recommendations that you also want to share. So next up, we have our panel discussion that will be moderated by Mr. Danny Meyer. For those who are not familiar with Mr. Meyer, Mr. Danny Meyer from SME Compete is the chairperson of the 4th cluster, and I was informed I must not forget this, Danny. I must mention that you are the chairperson of the 4th cluster that is responsible for promoting this conversation. The subject that will be discussed under this panel discussion begs to ask the question, how can the private sector in Namibia effectively contribute to the fight against corruption, and whose responsibility is it? And the people who would help us unpack this conversation are Mr. Eduardo Rodriguez, the country chairman of Shell, with over 22 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, working in Latin America and in Africa. He will be joined by Dr. Liaki Hangala, Non-Executive Director of Hangala Group. Dr. Hangala is a Non-Executive Director and Founding Executive Chairman of the Hangala Group. He retired effectively on the 1st of May 2023. Meanwhile, prior to an ambitious business venture at Hangala Group, he held various strategic leadership positions within the public and private sector, including serving as the Managing Director of NemPower and holding government appointments. His accolades include leading and building institutions with attributions of sustainability and longevity. Thank you so much, Dr. Hangala, for coming out of retirement to have this discussion with us. If you would join us in the floor this morning. He will also be joined by Mr. Bisi Uirap. Mr. Uirap is the NCCI president, current NCCI president, as well as the CEO of the Namibia Airports Company. He previously served as the Chief Executive Officer of Namport and has also held positions on boards in private entities. In addition to various accolades, his leadership style has been recognized for driving transformative and impactful change. Thank you so much, Mr. Uirap, for making time to be with us and to have this panel discussion with us this morning. So, Danny, if you would join the team in the front. Danny will take lead on the moderation of this discussion, and I'm assuming that there will be a segment where the audience will be brought into the conversation. So if you have questions and comments, jot them down until such time that Danny would give you a heads up to pose them. If we can please put our hands together for our virtual audience, for our audience that has tuned in. Thank you so much for making time to be with us this morning. And as pointed out earlier, if you also have any questions or comments that you would like to share, either with our panelists or with our room this morning, please feel free to do so on the chat box, and we will gladly share it with everyone. Thank you.
there are going to be lots of questions, so I'm going to ask the Secretariat from NCCI and AC if they could just bring some water for our panelists, because there might be some heated discussion here after questions.
I hear heated discussion, and I'm not sure if I should be nervous or not. Either way, while we're waiting for the microphones to be brought to the fore for our panelists, I just want to remind our audience in the room this morning that there would be a registration form similar to this one somewhere amongst us, and that it's ideal that you put your name and contact details, particularly if you would like to have the presentation shared with you. If you haven't had an opportunity to do so, I will pass this from the front to the back. Please make sure that you can put on your details. Yeah, does anybody have the other one though? Anybody have the other registration form? Fantastic, thank you so much. Over to you, Danny.
Thank you very much. So if you don't fill that form, you are going to get a knock on your door from the AAC to wipe that smile off your face. Huh? So, Honourable Minister, thank you very much for gracing the occasion by staying with us. We know that you have other commitments that you've shifted because you wanted to be with us for as long as possible. We really do appreciate that. And thank you very much to the leadership of the AAC as well. We know that you have so many other pressing commitments, but you really are honouring Cluster 4 by being here today. I spend my time working in CASIs around the country, townships. So I work with the small guys. I work with the future big guys. So for me, it's quite an honor to be in the presence of these senior leaders in the business arena. It would be amiss of me not to recognize the Cluster 4 representatives who are present here today, and the AAC Secretariat who've been working so hard. So can I ask you, Lauren, to start with? Where's Lauren? Is she there? Lauren, you're going to stand up. She's from the Chamber of Mines. And who are the others? I don't know. I know Antonio's here. Please remain standing for a moment. Antonio's here from the NCCI. Thank you very much. Anybody from NEF, Namibia Employers Federation, present with us today? Okay, then from the Sports Commission. Okay, anybody else from the cluster that's NIPDP, NTF, BIPA, so on? Okay, please stand up for a moment, yeah. Thank you very much. And let's recognize them. They really have been working very hard at conceptualizing and putting together this program. We recognize all of you. Thank you very much. And with your indulgence, Director General, we'd also thank you. And Lauren, by the way, congratulations again. She recently tied the knot, eh? See that big ring on her finger. Well done. Thank you. Please be seated. It would be amiss of us, and with your permission, please may we recognize Johanna. Where's Johanna? Johanna Absalom?
She's outside.
Okay, you'll call her in for a moment, please. And Alexander? And all the AAC people have been, ACC rather, who've been working so hard. Could I please ask them to stand up there for a moment? Okay, they're going to come in a minute, and we really do appreciate the work. Alexander, let's give them a big hand. Johanna, wow, look at that. Mr. Polis, no, you've got a good team there, these youngsters. And where's David Namulenga? David. Let me assure you, David. And David is an entrepreneur, started small, he's big today, his business. I know you're wondering why we got these old guys here. Don't worry, the next one we're going to have is going to be for young entrepreneurs, small business owners. Huh? Okay. But thank you again for being with us today and that encouragement. We've introduced the panelists here, so I think in the interest of time, all I'd like to add is that Eduardo Rodriguez actually studied in the United States. He's from Colombia, but he has a Bachelor of Science in Manufacturing Engineering from Boston, and he holds an MBA from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And he's married, 2 children, and the 2 cyclists are together. So afterwards you can exchange a bit of information there. So let's get straight into it, because I know that those who are out there watching also have some questions. So we heard from moderator earlier today, Elena, that Namibia ranks 8th of the 54 countries in the 2022 Mo Ibrahim Corruption Index, and 59th out of 180 countries in the 2023 Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International, placing Namibia, dynamite comes in small packages, 4th in the SADC region, Southern African Development Community. That is quite impressive. And I'm going to be amiss if I don't also point out that out of 150,000 startups that was conducted, startups and then the sustainability, Namibia now holds the 8th position in that survey that was done, the 8th position. So give it for those small entrepreneurs out there, hey, Minister, starting their businesses and sticking there. And you know, Namibia now ranks higher than Ghana and Tunisia. And since Namibia was added to that list of being ranked, we have climbed 12 places. So it just shows you entrepreneurship is thriving in this country. And what we do, I said earlier, we work in the CASIs. What we do, we start DG, Assistant DG, ED. We start already with the hairdressers, with the panel beaters, the spray painters, those who fix cars, and we say, do not dispose your chemicals, your oil, into the municipal sewage system. There are ways that we dispose of this material. We start with that. We want to inculcate that spirit of doing things properly, sticking to the law. And we gave you that insurance when you asked us to serve on this Cluster 4, that we will do that, and it's working. It's working. We are so impressed with what we find out there, whether it's in Inanna, Aruap, whether it's in Devundu, whether it's in Kurunkuru. I have the best job in the country, Minister, as you know. I visit every corner of the country all the time. We find that there are entrepreneurs out there who are responsible. And you can ask my 2 colleagues who are in this room. Sandrine, where are you? Put up your hand. Because they are the ones who check on them. Where's Tia? Where's Shapena? There she is. Huh? Those 2 and my other colleagues at the office, they know these are important factors for us to start really right there. Yes, it's important to do your bookkeeping, money discipline, and so on, but it's also important to do things to comply with the laws of the land if you want to build your business enterprise. So, the first round, I had to get that in because I know there's some SMEs out there watching. So, let's start off with BC. BC, the private sector governance landscape in Namibia. Enlighten us. What is happening there? Is the private sector playing its role, its collective role? Are they behaving ethically? Because we like to point fingers when we see green number plate vehicles dropping off children at school. But we don't point fingers at those luxury sedans, those German luxury sedans, dropping their children off at school. But we haste to point out, oh, look at the corrupt government officials. So tell us, what is the private sector actually doing here? Huh? We haven't got Sam Shavuti here, but I hope he's going to start checking on some of those things, those company-owned vehicles. Huh?
Thank you, Danny, for that introduction. But before I respond to your question, really just to thank the DG and the NCCI Secretariat for having put this very important seminar together. for us to really reflect on the issue of business, how they behave ethically, issues around governance. I think these are the core of our partnership. I think Steve has done a great job in sharing with us the landscape in which we operate, both as the private sector, but also as the public sector, and of course the civil society organizations. Namibia is known to have a very progressive legislative framework to create a platform where we can really do business in an ethical way. I think the legislative framework is strong. We are ranked fairly highly, as you have seen, in some of the very key agencies that are rating countries on the issue of governance. I must say that as a private sector, we can look at different levels of private sector, as highlighted by Steve. We have those private sector entities that are linked through their mother companies outside our country. And then you have the private sector that is homegrown. And of course, you have Business Namibia mainly looking at the state-owned enterprises. And one can categorize these in different platforms. If one looks at the state-owned enterprises, in addition to the NAM Code, the Companies Act, I think we are basically guided by the Public Enterprises Governance Act, PEGA, and that act really requires us as the public enterprises to make sure that we behave in a very ethical way. The governance frameworks are well laid out, and although it was a struggle for many public enterprises to adhere fully to the provisions of PEGA, I'm very happy to indicate that more and more we see public enterprises moving towards adhering to PEGA, but also to look at issues around NAM Code principles and responding to the corporate social responsibility requirements that are put on them. So although we are not there fully as public enterprises, the trend is very encouraging. So I'm very happy on that. Secondly, those entities that are linked to multinationals, by and large, are trying to be good citizens in many ways. My view, however, is that I think more needs to be done in terms of the investments that are coming from them in building capacity within Namibia, and also the decision-making processes that are being taken by these entities. More of that could be done to localize some of those critical decisions, because as Namibians, we would not just want to implement whatever is being decided in Johannesburg or elsewhere, but more and more decisions need to be taken here, taking into consideration the issues of ethical behavior requirements within our country, issues around capacity building, issues around responding to our social needs. So I think more and more needs to be done, but by and large, I think in terms of good behavior, one sees positive signs from there. And of course, we have the homegrown entities. Again, he has identified quite a number of them that are doing extremely well. The larger family-owned private companies in Namibia are doing quite well. Decisions are taken from within the country with full compliance to Namibian legislation. Capacity building does take place in these entities, but of course they need to be encouraged to do more. So I think by and large, there are very good responses to good governance, good behavior from the public, from businesses, but more needs to be done, and we just need to encourage them through engagements such as this and get those entities to participate in these discussions. Thank you, Johnny, for now.
So now I'm going to go to Dr. Liaki and Gala before I get to you, Steve, and Eduardo. So, Dr. Ngala, BIPA, Business and Intellectual Property Authority, recorded 12,666 registrations in business registrations in calendar year 2022. which was lower than 21, the year that we started pulling out of the COVID disruptions. But we don't see, although we see this buzzing entrepreneurship, there's hardly a village, a settlement town where you don't find marketplaces. Namibians are entrepreneurial, a high number of Namibians, but we don't see them moving into the formal sector. In fact, we see some who were in formal sector have gone back. They're operating under the radar. I mean, you move from public sector to business entrepreneur, and you've done the country proud, actually, in both public and private sector. Just share with us a little bit. How can we get this entrepreneurship, this migration from informal to formal and so on? I mean, it must be very difficult out there in the business arena. So you saw it from both sides of the table, the regulatory side and the operational side. Share with us a bit of your experience there. Because I know some of those small businesses out there, entrepreneurs, are eager to hear what you're going to tell them.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mayor. Before I start on your question, I want to say some few things. Ethical behavior of an individual in the business anyway does not start with the individual in the business. It starts at home. And therefore, it's very important that we make ethical behavior a national issue. It starts at home. It must therefore, if we want Namibia to behave ethically as a nation, it must start in our homes, it must start in our kindergarten, it must start in our schools. It must be clear from the beginning for the kid that it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to lie. It cannot start in a business. It must start there. It's therefore important for us to say what value system as a nation we want to set up. How do we want us to be defined? What reputation does Namibia we want to have? For me, particularly in this terrible global world, if we have 4 reputation globally, it's very important for us. We will succeed. Number 1, of course, a corrupt-free country. If we have a reputation of a corrupt-free country, if we have a reputation of Namibia being a safe and crime-free country, people want to be safe. You will see people coming to Namibia. If you have a reputation of an efficient society, efficiency starts with few things. Things start and work. I don't want to talk about myself, but let me talk about myself. BC knows, I chair NAC. Steve knows it. Steve will start in Mines and Energy. Mayor knows it. Wherever I have been, I never start a meeting late. Never. It must be on time. And of course, I get irritated even here. When we start late, you are wasting my time. So it's important when somebody comes from Katima Murilo to see an official in Windhoek at 8 o'clock. When that person comes, 8 o'clock, the official must be there. When a foreigner from Shell makes an appointment in London that I want to see official in Namibia at 10 o'clock in Namibia on Friday, that was efficiency. It defined the society. Also, the 4th important point for me is that if we are defined and have a reputation of a hard-working, nobody learns income private to a country through laziness. Just forget about it. Each company wants a hard-working society. So it's therefore up to us what reputation do we want to have? Again, at this age, let me talk about reputation. From the village where I come from, if my son comes or my daughter comes and say, oh, I got a boyfriend, and we want to get married, I say, oh, okay, where is he from? Oh, he's from Wirab family. Wirab, from which village are Wirab? They are from Oshikango. We are from Edunja. Then we say, oh, okay. Those people are good. They are hardworking. They don't steal. They don't believe in all kind of, jujus. So you can go and get married. Because they have a reputation. And it's the same as society. Therefore, I want, Mayor, that as a nation, we have a possibility to define ourselves. And when you define yourself, you don't need to answer many questions. If you travel, I'm from Namibia. Oh, by the way, in Namibia, we have no corruption. I come at the airport, I will not ask anything. It's important. So therefore, when we talk about ethical behavior in company or government, it has to start at home, the value system we have. Yes, coming to the question, I think it's very important when you set up your business how you want to be. Some want to work from the garage. Some want to have an office corporate system, and so on. But there are critical issues that you need to be. It's clear that you must have a clear strategy. You must have a clear governance system of decision making. Steve was talking here, the governance is important because it defines how you relate your decisions. More often than not, we forget that your business is built by the people that we employ. So you must also have a system of respecting your people, of being transparent to them, and communication to them. Because your business will only be good as itself, as your people. So sometimes in small companies, these systems are not there. The other important system of companies, small companies, is compliance. I see that a number of us now want to go in the oil business. And people like my friend from Shell, to choose you, they have very strong compliance. They want to know, is your book audited? Do you have auditors? Do you have an office? Do you report? So sometimes in small business, we overlook compliance. Compliance is very important. And then, naturally, efficiency in treating your customers. Extremely very important. And then, the way you communicate to your stakeholder. So, but as our late president liked to say, the processes and systems is also important in migration from a small to a big company. So, and then during that process, you then set up your value system. That must also include code of conduct. And then, of course, if you are the leader, the owner, exemplary leaders by yourself. If you come late, forget it, your employee will come late. If you lie, they will lie. If you pay bribe, they think it's a good thing. So exemplary leadership is very important, either in a small or big companies. Then the last point I want to say, naturally, you are in business to make money. So the issue of cost management. If you can be able to know that I will meet my operational expenditure with my operational income. Because most of the time, we don't even know our assets, we don't know our cost. And it's when the bank start calling that you realize that things are not good. So therefore, the management, financial management system are also important. Thank you. I can talk a lot, but thank you.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Dr. Ngala. As you said, it starts at home. And for me, Elena, it was a wake-up call this morning when you spoke about the wedding. Eh? So I'm not going to say, hey, in future, serve me first and so on. It starts at home. So guys out there listening, yeah, just remember, don't come with stories when daddy comes home late, before, after the children have gone to bed, eh? You find, for some other reason, you delegate the responsibility of going to parent-teachers meetings, consultative sessions, to the mother of the children. You as the father also have responsibility. As you say, Dr. Ngala, it starts right there at home. So, before we get to you, Steve, I'm going to ask Eduardo just to share. He's worked in several countries, more recently in Sao Tome and Principe in Equatorial Guinea, and he's worked in Latin American countries as well, including his own. Share with us a little bit of what happens there.
Thank you, Danny. Hello? Hello? Hello. Danny, thank you very much, and thank you all for this invitation. Mr. Ngala, I really took note of your very authentic messages, so thank you for that. I am new to Namibia. This is my second trip to Namibia. The first one was in April for the National Namibia International Energy Conference, and this is my second trip right now. Hopefully I can move to Namibia in July if my immigration papers work on time. So I hope to be resident in Namibia in July. In my first trip in the Namibia conference, I set 3 principles that we stand by, and I believe it's important. It's we all must work together. Also, we must have a learner mindset, especially for a company like Shell. For me, I'm new to a country. We are guests in this country, and we must learn, and we must work together. And the second one, and the third one, which is very important, and you mentioned a lot, Steve, on that about the shareholders, but it's a mutual win-win, which is maintain the Namibia competitive case, which drives to what we're discussing right now, anti-corruption, or as we call it, compliance. It makes a country competitive. Then you're asking me about how is it compared to the rest of the countries, and I have to say that I'm very impressed with what I have seen in Namibia. You mentioned the corruption perception index, which Namibia is 59. I heard it's around that. That's still considered high risk. But all the countries that I work in, they're all much higher in the corruption perception index. So what that tells me is that you're having the right discussions. It's like my teenage boys that I tell them, you're not there yet, but you're in the right path. And I think everything that I've seen in Namibia so far, and I still have yet a lot to learn, it's quite impressive. It's quite impressive, the discussions that you're having. It's quite impressive, the mindset, which is something very important. And it's impressive, the achievements that I have seen so far in terms of infrastructure, education, and everything that I have encountered. So I think it's a good base with a proper mindset. So we call it anti-corruption, or ABC as we call it, falls under the ethics and compliance part, because one part is the compliance, which is the legal part, but the other one is the ethical part as well, which Mr. Angala mentioned quite a bit of it. And clearly another part that we look a lot into it, not only the ethic and compliance part, but also the safety aspects, the health, safety, and environment. Those are two components that are very important. I'm going to sidetrack here a little bit, because what I've seen, to answer quickly your question, you're doing great. You're doing great. You're great in the it was very important for me to come to this session, which I have not experienced it in many other countries before. So this is a great sign, and I personally wanted to come here to show our commitment to ethics and compliance in general, and everything that holds with it, and everything that we can do to support and strengthen the ethics and compliance in Namibia. You can count us in that, in participation, in transferring knowledge, in everything that we have learned everywhere else, because we have some share of experience, some good, some other not good, but we have learned, and every time our ethic and compliance is stronger, and it's something that we live in. And it's something that for me is very easy, because as you were mentioning, it starts at home. And for Shell, it's very simple for me, because the ethic and compliance, the code of conduct of our company is aligned with my values, so I can feel I can work anywhere, because I'm just working with my natural instincts. Okay? One last message that I wanted to give is coming to Namibia. One of the questions that we've had, or one of the concerns, is local content, and that has come in the agenda. And as I mentioned before, two key priorities for companies in the oil and gas, and I'm sure as well for the mining industry and these international companies, is there's two components that we are very strict about it. One is clearly health, safety, and environment, but the other one is compliance. So by being compliant and by fighting anti-corruption and all us working together, you're opening opportunities and building a strong foundations for working with the oil and gas industry. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, you have experience in numerous sectors, actually. So the financial services, recently we've had to go through all that, know your customer and so on and so forth. Became an irritation to some. BEPA also requirements, beneficial ownership and so on and so forth. But just share some of your experiences on how are we actually doing? How are the various sectors that you've been directly involved in, how are we doing?
Yeah. So I'll take you back to that graph of the World Economic Forum competitiveness. And you might remember that ease of doing business was our most uncompetitive factor. Now, there are a number of factors here. We inherited, I think, an overregulated economy. We had, at independence, all sorts of petty laws which were not constructive at all. But we also went and put in quite a lot of new petty or sort of bureaucratic processes. So we added rather than subtracted. And that World Economic Forum rating, which goes back 10 years, and as recently as 4 years ago, was quite a shock to us, because we didn't realize quite how bureaucratic we were with what we'd inherited and what we'd set up. And Nangula Wanja has this challenge, like I did after independence, of going around the world and saying, we have this incredible place with amazing resources and incredible people and good infrastructure and so on. But when you come to actually registering to set up a business, it's difficult because we've got too many steps. the example that kept being quoted was that it used to take us 66 days to register a business. Rwanda took 6 hours. And that was the extreme. I think we've improved. I think BIPA has improved to some extent now, and I think some of those processes are getting there. Nangula and her team are, of course, trying to get there all the time, and the Ministry of Trade is trying to get there. But now we've got a new set of issues, and these come with global concerns around cybersecurity, around money laundering, around international illicit financial flows, and so on. So that's a new raft of things which you can't get away from. You have to be part of that global community in stopping that bad global practice. But if we can just highlight what are the non-negotiables that we must do, beneficial ownership, anti-money laundering, anti-corruption, and go through our long list of red tape and get rid of some of those. 20 years ago, we had the IFC come in here and do a red tape analysis. And it was frightening how many steps there were and how much you could actually simplify. So on the one hand, I agree that we have to tighten up to become internationally acceptable as a country. Cyber attacks are higher in Namibia than in most other countries. And we have to attend to that. But I think we need to do that red tape analysis again and really sit in a tripartite arrangement and say, do we really need this, and make it easier to do business here, to come here. Your immigration thing shouldn't be an issue at all. And the tourism visas, really, we need to address that quickly so that we have this impression that Namibia is friendly, efficient, and you can do business here, while seeing that we are not a loophole into the international trading systems, etc.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, ease of doing business, the red tape, the bureaucracy, and we come across that every day, don't we, here? Fitness certificates, some of the bylaws in the town. If you are in the food business, your kitchen has to have white tiles, not beige, not yellow, white tiles on the floor and up to the roof, up to the ceiling. Butchery as well. Often when I drive in the north and I see the meat hanging under the tree, I wonder, how are we going to put tiles in the tree and so forth. So you're right, the bureaucracy, the red tape. And I know that Honourable Minister Sindimbo also very, very much aware of that. We have spoken about that before. The bylaw in Windhoek says you should have separate toilets for white people and black people. Can you imagine? Still today. So we can give you a whole, that long list. Let's share it with the Minister sometime. Okay, so there we are. Now let's move on to the next one. We're going to just do this a little bit shorter because I know there are people anxious to ask some questions. So perhaps what I can do is I see some of you are anxious to ask any questions you want to pose to any of the panelists at this juncture before we move to the second round of interventions from the panelists. Any questions? Your hand up, please. No? Wow. Okay, any of the people out there posing any questions? No? Okay. Oh, Elena. Are they shell-shocked? Oh, there, the ED. Can we take the mic to the ED quickly? How did the other guy look? If you look like that, what happened to the other guy? Huh?
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear panelists, and thank you very much, my brother, moderator, for the floor. I want to also seek the indulgence of my Director General. I'm very happy about what is happening here, and I could say that we have all the support from the private sector, especially with my active brother, who is actually the chairperson of the Cluster 4, which is having this grand goal or objective to prevent corruption in the private sector. Mine is trying to link it to what Mr. Galloway mentioned in terms of the national plan of actions of the APRM, which action I like, and I like that review of the African peer review mechanism. Now, in your introduction, Mr. Galloway, you did mention that for ensuring ethical conduct in organizations, and I presume these are private entities and civil society organizations, very much where we envision that we need to streamline, mainstreaming the anti-corruption measure. And I think this seminar is just an indicative of that I think there is a positive and response from the private sector that they are inculcating and fostering this kind of, envision that is being put there to fight corruption in Namibia, and borrowing the word made by Mr. Riaka there in terms of the reputation that we want to see is a corrupt-free Namibia. Now, we are about to, as a country, come up with a national anti-corruption policy framework. The intent of that framework is actually to devolve certain responsibility to not only private sector, but also to parastatals. Of course, we have heard how they perform. What support in terms of mainstreaming, and I think I'm already seeing it, that the private sector is willing to give as this elephant is about to come, because there will be consultations, and what support and how do you want this to be done in terms of mainstreaming? I think I just put that in front before these public consultations comes. I think I end my question there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Moderator.
Yeah, Dr. Liaki.
Okay. I think to me there are a number of issues. But I think the first thing we should do as citizens and as comrades, do we tell each other the truth? Mr. Noah, what do you think the perception of Namibians to ACC? Something is just a public exercise. It's nice to have anti-corruption commission. It sounds good when the guy from Shell and other comes here. Some think it's there to even to protect some other big guys. Some things it's not working because there are no resources. If you see countries that are corrupt-free, it's driven by government, and they are ruthless. If you start with Singapore, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, who was very ruthless, one day his minister went to a resort sponsored by the private company, and he dealt with that private company, and it's forbidden. So he called the minister when he came back. Where were you? I was this company. Who paid? Is that company. Say, okay, you are fired. From that day, no other minister behaved that way. In China, they kill you. Is that not true? They kill you. So, which means that, Mr. E.D., if we want to fight corruption, there must be consequences for those who are misbehaving. So we must have the courage to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. If one minister is fired by the president on the spot because of corruption, no any other minister will behave that way. We tolerate it. We tolerate in our churches. We, churchgoers, spend our money. At the end of the year, you come, money is disappeared. Nobody does anything. So it's not only in government. So therefore, I think it's very, very important that charity must start at the top, at government. And there must be consequences. If there are no consequences, we keep on talking, having this seminar, because I know I can steal. Of course, the private sector will behave accordingly. If it is known that the private sector have violated Namibian law, the license will be taken away. No private sector behave that way. Of course, the other thing important in business is that it's important for a company to be listed as well. Because when you are on a stock exchange and your brand misbehave, your customers and your shareholders will punish you. Your shares will drop immediately. So there are consequences. So I would want to suggest that let us first start with government, because in most societies, it's government that takes the lead. And then we are seeing corruption in the public sector. Some Namibian companies, particularly construction, they feel they don't get tenders because they don't have brown envelope to give to the officials. And people know it, and nobody take action. So therefore, I think let us, our public sector, our government, and particularly the watchdog, like ACC, really be ruthless and give good signs. If you misbehave, the Namibian society cannot tolerate you. That's what we do in Namibia. That's how Singapore have gone that way. That's how China goes that way. That's how people in the Nordic country go that way. They don't tolerate any misbehavior in ethical behavior. And it's not only corruption, it's just if you behave in an unethical manner publicly. I'll tell you in a Nordic country, for example, if you are reported that you were drunk in the pub and you went out to the meeting, tomorrow you are fired because it's misbehavior. It starts that way.
Just pause on two. So there we are. We know that's the doctor, the Aki Ngala we've come to know and respect. Straight talking, never minces his words. But I do hope that we follow that Singapore model rather than China, because our cemetery is already rather full here. And I have many full cemeteries, so let's be careful with that one. So let's hear from the voice of business, the president of the NCCI.
Thank you, Danny and Edie, for that question. I think what we must understand is when you set up a business, I want to believe that at the top of your mind are two things. Number one is to address a particular deficiency or a need in the society. Either there is no bread in that village, therefore I'll put up a small bakery to provide and close that gap. And of course, automatically you expect to get some returns. You want to make some profit. And these profits come through your people, through people that you train, that you employ. Therefore, for the private sector to participate in helping the ACC, the Namibian nation at large, both public and private, is almost something that should come obvious. Because for us to be able to make profit and to address a particular need in a given society, we need to work together and play by the rules of that particular game. And that is how it should be. For a long time, we were not able to make that link between what we as businesses provide and what comes to us. People are normally seen as corrupt, as unethical, because sometimes we as businesses do not reward them appropriately. They feel that they are being shortchanged in the process, both in terms of the remuneration. They feel that what they give is not being reciprocated in a fair way. And number two, in terms of building capacity, in many instances, we as private sector or generally, even in government, we feel that by getting cheap labor, we are cutting it short, and that will make more money. But the more you invest in your people, the more you enable your people to meet a particular need that you want to close, the better returns you get, because they project a positive image about your company, both in the way they behave. Therefore, you need to train them to behave well, but also in terms of their ability to deliver the particular service that you want to give. Therefore, it's very important that as businesses, that we understand the combination between what our aim is as a business, but also how we can meet that business through our people. To capacitate our people is to meet the needs of that particular society and to behave along the rules that are set either by society or by government or by that industry that we work in. Therefore, I think the private sector stands ready to work with all the institutions in terms of that anti-corruption framework that is being driven, and who really want to work through NCCI, but also through other business chambers, like the Chamber of Mines and many others, to really hold hands to project Namibia as a country that stands by what it says and that is doing business in an ethical and compliant manner. I thank you.
Thank you. So business must make decent profit decently. And you're right. It's very sad when we read the head of a supermarket chain earning tens of millions of dollars, and the cashiers standing there with all-day interaction with the customers and earning less than $2,000 a month. It's a disgrace. But you want to say, I can see that burning look on your face, Steve.
Yeah, just to the ED's question relating to the APRM report and the program of action, how do we mainstream it? There have been some fairly concise recommendations here about how we deal with it. But, you know, the Institute of Corporate Governance has no regulatory role at all. Ours is a guidance role, ours is a custodianship of good practice. And we try and do that as best we can. But there are a number of other organizations, and the chambers, of course, have some clout. The Chamber of Mines, for example, has acted against members who are destroying the name of the Chamber of Mines. So any deviant members must be brought to account by that representative body. And I think the Chamber of Mines has done it. I'm sure you do that yourselves. The auditing firms is another area. You know, a lot has been talked about weddings and corruption around weddings. The famous Gupta wedding, of course, went under the radar somehow because it was below materiality. A 30 million corrupt spending on a wedding somehow was overlooked. And, you know, the auditing profession, I think, is getting there now to say that it doesn't matter what the materiality level is. If it's corrupt, it's corrupt. And there must be a qualitative materiality as well. So those professionals, those professions that surround and sometimes look the other way around at corruption really have to come out and blow the whistle on corruption. I really do think that if we have that sort of mainstreaming to say we're all in this, and the Whistleblowing Protection Act is very important for that. We had a guest speaker at the NICG conference last year from Nigeria. And they have what is called a bribe act there. And we didn't realize that we can learn a lot from Nigeria in anti-bribery. And they've implemented an anti-bribe, it's called the Bribe Act, it's anti-bribing. And it's an incentivization program. Now, you might not want to go there because you get incentive for your neighbors, for busting your neighbor's corruption, you know. And maybe that's something we should be getting to, that it's not just a confidential whistleblower's line, but there's actually an incentive to call time on corruption. Maybe we should be looking at that. I don't think our corruption is nearly as endemic as some other countries. The last point I want to make on the APRM report is that the recommendations or the conclusions out of APRM is that ACC, Ombudsman, etc., are underfunded, and because they're underfunded, they are reactive. If they were properly capacitated and given the sort of funding we need, then they might be able to become more proactive. And the conclusion in that report is that ACC is really spending a lot of its time on petty crimes and not on the big corruption issues. So that's the finding. The youth unemployment report, which was a separate report, made a very damning finding, and we've got 62% unemployment in some of the northern areas on youth unemployment. And one of the key findings was that there was endemic corruption, not in the country as a whole, but in the channels that got funding for education and for other youth activities, which could have countered the unemployment, the terrible unemployment statistics. And the conclusion was that the channels providing that funding is endemically corrupt. And that's a very serious finding from our peers in Africa. And it's something you would think you'd be able to handle and get to the actual cause of where that money is going. So there's some very practical recommendations, and I really would like us to take that report and internalize it as fast as we can, right through all of the mainstream channels we've talked about.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Would you like to add anything? No. There was a question. There was a question in the back there, please. And whilst the mic is making its way to the back there, we'll come back to you. We're going to come back to you. Whilst making his way to the back there, I think we're going to focus now on questions from the floor, because our time is getting a bit short, and we want to make sure that you all have been here and you feel that you've really drawn value from attending. Okay, question. Please just say your name and if you're representing anybody or yourself.
Good morning. My name is Mike, and I'm here to represent the private sectors. While I'm under the sun of this discussion, I just have a few questions that I need clarity on. The first one is, I want to understand the meaning of corruption. And then the second one is, how do I realize that I'm now involved in corruption? And then the third one is, what must I do to avoid or prevent corruption?
Thank you.
And the last one, the fourth is, why must I fight corruption?
Okay. Okay, Michael, thank you for those. This way, please. We've literally only got a few minutes, but I'm sure that Alina will give us a little bit of extra time. Hey, before you show us the red card. Where's that red card? Okay.
Good morning. Yeah, very good questions. I think sometimes the simple questions are the most important. I'm also in the private sector. Been working 25 years in my own company in tourism. And I just feel that I think what would help anti-corruption a lot is that if we could have better access to government in the way that they become more approachable. I've done this now 25 years. I'm focusing on the French, Italian, Spanish-speaking markets. And for 25 years, we've been fighting for work permits. And we've always asked, can you come around to our office to meet us? Can we come and meet you? Can we present who we are? Can we explain our problems, our situations? And up to this year, in January, we finally got invited to Home Affairs to present our case to a few people, and nobody was interested, ever. And I just feel that at some stage, it's either, I mean, we never did any corruption, because I'm German, so I'm really against that. But not saying that all Germans are against it, I'm sure they are not. I'm actually Namibian, German-born. But I'm just thinking that if there was more like comprehension between the two parties, more talking together, more explaining, and not seeming so unapproachable, like the big guy just putting you down, and you're on your own as a small or medium business, and you must just fight your way through. And anyway, you sometimes get the feeling government doesn't care, they're happy to get your taxes, but any other help that you might need, Like, for example, maybe you do need some work permits to actually make things work. That's just being shot down all the time. And I think if we can somehow create a department within government that does that link between the public sector and the private sector, and where we can go to and ask for help, I think that would make a huge difference.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope that Minister Pumbushimi is listening or looking online at this, so that those budgets come, that you can do more. The DG, Mr. Wallace Noah, would like to have the mic here, please. Okay. And time management, remember what Liaki Ngala said? Officials out there, when there's a meeting at 8, then you be there at 8. And Madam, please also engage with, and I'm sure the President of NCCI will have something to say in a moment also about acting the bridge, being the bridge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the panelists for this very informative session. And what they have said here is very true. If we want to make this country a corrupt-free country, then we must tackle all forms of unethical behaviors. They must all be tackled. The problem we have in Namibia, and this is what we have experienced as anti-corruption commission officials, is that there is a narrow definition, or rather understanding, of what corruption is. Because the majority of the people believe corruption is only what can be taken to criminal court for criminal prosecution, which is not the case. The worst form of corruption, and that is the type of corruption that you find in Namibia, is administrative corruption in the form of mismanagement, unethical behaviors, misconduct, and misuse of resources, whether in private sector or in public sector. That is the worst form of corruption. And this is the type of corruption that ought to be dealt with by administrative authority, as Dr. Hangala has said. Immediate action, even before anti-corruption commission comes in. The culprit should have already been dealt with, if needs be, even shut the door. And I agree with him. I've been to Singapore. That is what's happening. Authorities don't wait for criminal investigating agencies to rein in when you know that what a person has done is administratively a misconduct. If we could just have that proper understanding of corruption, that corruption is a broader phenomena, and it's not only what can be taken on for criminal prosecution. If you wait for something that can only be taken to criminal prosecution, you have an example of cases that have taken how long, how many years? Up to 20 years on the court roll. Can we sort out Namibia if we take it that line only? That is the reason why, having experienced that, that is basically one of the reasons why we have decided that no, now enough is enough. We have to come up with a policy framework on fighting corruption and review the law, the anti-corruption law, so that hopefully the lawmakers give us mandate to deal with administrative officers and politicians when they are not taking on their subordinates, when their subordinates are misconducting themselves. That's the only way that we can clean it up, because the public expectation now is that any misconduct under the sun, Anti-Corruption Commission must deal with it. But the law speaks differently. The law has a specific defined mandate of the corruption offenses that can be handled by Anti-Corruption Commission. And the rest ought to be dealt with by administrative authority. Today, you find that even in officials who come to office late, exactly as Dr. Hangara has pointed out, you find the head of the institution coming to report that kind of behavior to Anti-Corruption Commission. And when he is questioned, what action has been taken? You know their answer. No, we have taken that matter to Anti-Corruption Commission. You see? That's the kind of illness that unfortunately is being experienced. And that is what is killing our society. If we can just clean up those kind of things. You see, perception and real corruption, they all matter. Perception helps us to understand what we need to do so that we can satisfy those who are perceiving the country to be corrupt. Real corruption needs to be taken right away on the head, because elements will be there, evidence will be there, everything will be there. But where there's perception, this is what drove us to decide that let us come up with a new policy and let us review the law so that we can address the concern which currently is not being addressed by the relevant authorities that could be addressing those authorities. To give an example, if someone is appointed in a position and you have given me requirement that I am appointing you on condition that you disclose everything that you have, and then later on, that person does not disclose, you found that he has not disclosed everything that you have, it's you, the appointing authority, who's supposed to say, no, look, you are dishonest to me. As a result, I fire you from this position, because if you are dishonest to disclose to me everything that you have, then definitely I cannot trust you that you will be able to do the work for which I have appointed you in that position. Now, the perception from the public is that, where is Anti-Corruption Commission in this matter? You see, that unfortunately, those are the kind of things. And that's where we are saying that maybe time has come that we just have to rein in, because it appears we must govern all the structures.
Thank you, DG. So there we are. We should already address the problem at source. People should be doing their work, supervisors. One last question, and then we're going to go to the panel to round up. There's a hand over there, please, quickly. And then don't forget Michael. Where are you, Michael? You haven't gone, eh? Michael, are you still there? Okay. So one last question, then we're going to have to wrap up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vera, and I'm also from the private sector, specifically in the space of consulting, focusing on operational excellence and strategy. So my question is around getting the private sector to behave ethically in business. And I'm of the belief that to get this sector on that side of the table, which is behaving ethically, also comes with making it easy for them to do business. And I know we did talk about the point of business registration, but I think one major issue which SMEs also face currently in Namibia is the ease of payment, ease of making transactions into the country and out of the country. Now, for me as a consultant, when I work with individual entrepreneurs, sometimes it's more on advisory basis. So I get payment for hourly fees. Now, for each of that payment I receive, I need to go into the bank to sign a declaration or something. If I cannot do that, the other option will be, because we do not have the payment gateways which other countries have, like PayPal, Stripe, and so on, then I have to find a friend or relative who is abroad in one of these countries. Their account collects that amount, and at a certain point, the whole lump sum is sent to me. Now, for that, I need to give them a fee for collecting that money on my behalf, which then means my profit margin is continuously
So
reduced.
what is the question or what is the solution? Would you?
I'm getting to the question now. So my question is, what is being done? Is there any form of advocacy going on to address these issues for us? Because the more of that profit I lose, the more tempted I become to not declare that as revenue, right?
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Okay. So I'm sure the Chamber of Commerce has noted that and others. So I'm going to go around, starting with you, Eduardo, but you're a man, a few words. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing?
No, I think, again, congratulations for this. My impression is positive overall. And yes, there's an ethical component on corruption, but also there's a business component, no? If there's no corruption, as the lady mentioned very well, it's competitive, no? It just makes things more streamlined, and it just goes, the money goes where it needs to go, which is a virtuous circle and not a vicious circle. And if you have a virtuous circle, the pie gets bigger, bigger, and everybody benefits without the need of corruption.
Thank you. Then we move to you, Steve, and then Dr. Angala, and the last word will come from the President of NCCI.
Thanks very much, Danny. I think on behalf of the Institute of Corporate Governance, we're incredibly encouraged by this openness. It really is a very good start. Our offer is to work with public institutions like yourselves to really get this ethical culture entrenched at boards. We don't have any regulatory powers, but we can really help the integrity of boards, of governing bodies, if we can set up a framework that encourages that. The chambers have a strong role to play. The auditing profession, I saw ICANN, I think, in fact, Cameron represents ICANN as well. Fenny was here earlier. We really need to mainstream this sort of ethical conduct right through society and get those agents who are looking at the transactions and the banks, of course, as well, to see if we can, at the one hand, streamline them and make them easier, but on the other hand, be careful that we're not falling into these global corruption traps. And we have to do it together, and this is a very, very good forum to share these ideas. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Dr. Angala. It is on.
Okay. I have 3 points. One is really that, that to build an ethical society. Ethical society, I guess, means trust, that you trust people. There are issues of behavior in our society, which I think are corruption, that are very disturbing, and we don't talk about them. For example, we have in our society somebody who takes money for the elder, for the aged, and he or she does not give money to the old people. She misuses that money, or he misuses that money. Or I have seen now at our village, I don't know where the other villages, the kids lost their parents, both of them. And that lady was taking money for the orphans. And the orphans are in a very terrible situation. They don't get the money. Is that not corruption? There are many mothers here who want to give employment to people to take care of their houses, domestically and so on. But they say, I will not do it because if I put somebody there, I put somebody sometimes, and that person steals all my things. There are many people who want to, on the farms, employ people. But you come, your goats are not there. So, therefore, we need to work hard to bring ethics to our society. Because in that way, if we trust people, we also create employment. I think that's one. That let us have an ethical society that creates trust. The second point, of course, is that I thank the ACC for organizing this. It's a good start and a good beginning, and we have to work together with the private sector. My last point is, I think the Director General mentioned it. Sometimes we try to address corruption and increase inefficiency. I have a personal problem with a Central Procurement Act, particularly when I chair some of the state-owned enterprises. When I was the MD of Nampower, we have our own tender board. And I think we did well. There was no corruption. And it was fast. Now the central procurement, the state-owned enterprises have to bring all the tenders there. It takes a long time. Sometimes they all bring inefficiency. But also the direct company that giving money or ministry cannot take accountability because they blame now the central procurement. So we bring inefficiency in society. So I think we must be brave enough if we have taken something to work, and if it's not working, let us, revise it. Yeah, because, yes, I believe corruption, management corruption and efficiency in society is not mutual exclusive. And it's only when it's mutual, non-exclusive, that we can make this society very productive. Otherwise, I think let us work together, public and private, to get corruption out of our society. It just takes the public resources, steal from the poor to those that have. Because most people who steal are the ones who have. The other, of course, important thing for public sector is to pay our people well. I mean, you have a ED and people below, they paid not like in private sector and they deal with them. I think it's a cabbage in, cabbage out. If you pay your people badly, they will, they will look at other alternatives because it is possible that life is very tough. And they see that people who are driving Mercedes-Benz and BM, it's not because they worked hard. It's because they had other means. So therefore, let us also take care of our people, those that are in the public sector, because they deal with public resources of the whole country, and therefore we must reward them well. Thank you.
Okay. Now, yeah, thank you for nodding your head there, Michael. I see there's a lot of wisdom that's coming from this side. Eh? Okay, BC.
Thank you, Danny. I want to believe that all of us are of the opinion that for us to take this country forward, it should be an effort of partnerships. Partnership between the government, the private sector, civil society, and everybody else. Therefore, on the question that was raised by my sister there, government should be accessible to the private sector and to everybody else, because primarily we expect government to create an environment where we from Business Namibia should be doing business in a very conducive manner. And I would want to encourage you and others who seem to have some serious struggles in accessing government services to make use of the entities and infrastructures that are there to approach the government. I think, as we have indicated earlier on, we have many institutions who are recognized by the government, who work with the government, including the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the NIPDB, and others are available to assist individuals who may have those difficulties. And I can tell you these structures do work. Maybe not always, but they do work, and they have made it possible for government to listen to Business Namibia to resolve some of the issues. We are talking about issues around ethical behavior, about anti-corruption, but the most important thing for us to do is to really raise the bar in terms of how we engage with each other, is to understand what is corruption, as my brother there has asked, what is ethical behavior, and how can we as Namibians work together to cut out all these things. And it is possible, it can be done. The show that we see this morning is a good example of partnership between a government institution, which is ACC, and the private sector. And these discussions must continue. We must unpack and we must deal with the very basic issues. Who would have thought that the lack of training of our employees or underpaying our employees could sort of enlarge the possibilities of creating a corrupt system within your institutions? Because you are breeding that ground of a very unhappy employee for whatever reason. Therefore, as private sector, let us make sure that our employees are happy. As government officials, let us make sure that our employees are happy. Because many a times we say government officials are corrupt. There is somebody who receives in terms of bribery, and there is somebody that gives. And more often than not, it is the two parties that are involved, either the private sector and the government, whichever way it is. Therefore, it's very important for us to partner, to work together to take this country forward. It is only through collective behavior and collective bargaining that we can resolve some of these issues. Finally, I want to thank our Director General and his staff, really, for the hard work they are doing under very difficult conditions. Director General, we are there as private sector to work with you. Please do feel free to call on us so that we can, in partnership, try and tackle this beast. I think we're on the right track. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Bisi. I'd like to thank Bisi, Liaki, Eduardo, and Stephen for being on the panel. And I'd like to just end by saying that 2 weeks ago, I had the good fortune to interact and spend a bit of time with Tuli Mutensela, who was mentioned this morning. And she told me she had recently been to Namibia, and I hope that she'll be back soon. And she saw on my jacket my lapel badge, and she said, "Oh, you're a Rotarian." And I said, "Yes." She said, "The oldest service club in the world." I said, "Yes." And she said, "You know what, you guys, I often use your four-way test when people ask me about ethics and integrity." So I'm going to end by just quickly reading it to you. It's a four-way test that we have to rigidly subscribe to as Rotarians. And Rotarians are business and professional people, men and women from all walks, from all sectors. So it's the four-way test of the things that we think, we say, and we do. Firstly, is it the truth? Secondly, is it fair to all concerned? Thirdly, will it build goodwill and better friendship? And fourthly, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And I was so touched when Tuli Madonsela, who is now a professor at Stellenbosch, referred to this, that I thought I should share it with you as our closing words today. Thank you very much. I have a small gift there for the panelists. I'll give that to you later on. And we now hand back to you, Elena. And thank you very much for giving me the extra 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our panel of gentlemen. Next time, I promise we'll have a lady or two in there, just so that we can balance.
Noisy gentlemen, eh?
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that fruitful discussion. I'm sure there's been quite a few takeaways for us. I know there's been a few for me. Thank you also to Danny for moderating that session for us. Really, really appreciated that. And particularly that last principle that you shared with us that I hope can also be helpful to all of us. So a lot was said today throughout this engagement, starting on from the morning when we had our opening. We had remarks from Mr. Noah, who welcomed us and was sharing the strategy, some parts of the strategy. also having Mr. Galloway share a whole full presentation, remarks from the Deputy Minister that was here, the panel discussion that we just had, the questions and interactions that we've had. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm really excited by the opportunities that are available for collaboration. For collaboration to make sure that we safeguard our Namibian brand. Because this brand is important to all of us and it impacts us one way or another, as very bluntly shared by Dr. Hangala. We all have a role to play. And if there's one thing that I've learned in my short time when I was in the Windhoek City Police, was that it cannot be done by the entities that are tasked to do it on their own, as clearly pointed out by Mr. Noah. It was very interesting how people often, if I could share from that experience, it was very interesting how people perceived crime and why crime was happening and why crime, or how crime needed to be stopped or at least reduced. One of the things that was very clear for me was it wasn't the police that was going to do it on their own, because the criminals were in the community. They were coming from our homes to do what they were doing. So there was an important aspect of the community involvement in making sure that we stop crime. Similarly, so I think with corruption, we all have a role to play. Sometimes we have cultures that we embed in our corporate entities, that we behave in a particular way when we are in our organizations. But the minute we leave, we sort of forget that these are the values that we're signing up for. When I think about safety, for example, I have learned that some people will adopt a safety culture in the workplace, and they will not necessarily live that culture outside the workplace. So if we're going to be ethical in the business environment, it would not do us great if we don't continue to embed that kind of behavior outside of the business environment. So churches have a role to play. Traditional authorities have a role to play. Education has a role to play. Corporate entities have a role to play. And of course, the anti-corruption, the NICG, and various other entities that are in that space have a role to play. But you and I have a role to play. Thank you, Dr. Hangala, for calling it as it is this morning. If we're going to be late, that's corruption. So thank you for being blunt and honest about these things, because we've not done ourselves a service when we have become so diplomatic with one another, when we've become so cautious about what we're saying, because in doing that, we've actually allowed ourselves to misbehave in ways that didn't benefit us. So I don't want to dwell too much on that. I'm interestingly looking forward to what can be done, Mr. Telvis, with your team in the communication space, and how we can help and support to make sure that the messaging does get to where it needs to go. It's packaged in the right way, because I guess on a community level, perhaps the language of ethics is a different one to use, and perhaps a more simplified message would help us understand that even corruption is at weddings and at funerals and various other examples that we shared this morning. Just to remind us, we are 59th out of 180 countries on the Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International. That should make us uncomfortable. As if that was not bad enough, we're also the 8th out of 54, and I know the gentleman from Shell said you have worked in countries that have worse, but I guess the wonderful thing about that is we get an opportunity to now reflect, is that really where we want to be? Or do we want to do better? And if we want to do better, as a collective, what are we going to do better? I don't want to delay the end of this engagement, because I know you have other pressing commitments after this engagement. But I have a few announcements that I want to make before our last speaker comes to the podium. And that is, after this engagement, there's a generous refreshment segment that has been arranged for us, where we can have some food and some drink. Please don't dash off. Have a chat, have a drink, and let's discuss how we can collaborate in our different entities and the different spaces that we're in to make a difference in the fight, I want to say, against corruption. You have all our sympathies, Mr. Noah, because we have placed all of it, literally, we've placed on your shoulders without realizing just what you have said today. That sometimes the ball is really in our court, but because we don't want to own up to it, we happily just push it over to you. So please don't dash off. Have a moment to chat with Mr. Noah and see what you can do to support the initiatives that are being run under the Anti-Corruption Commission. We also have another a photo opportunity that will be arranged, so please also don't dash off, and let's make sure that we capture you. Thank you so much to the viewers online. We can see that you're following, though we haven't had any questions for you. I guess you were very clear, Danny, in everything that you were doing, that we didn't have a lot of questions that were coming through from there. We have been streaming the entire time that we were here on the NBC's social media sites, on the NCCI social media sites, as well as the ACC sites. So if you missed something, you have an opportunity to go back and reflect on the conversation that we have had. This will also not be the last engagement where we will discuss this issue and how we want to change our country and our people's behavior as it pertains to corruption. And we really, really look forward to what the ACC and the various partners are going to do in that space, with the chamber included, of course. I'm an extremely proud Namibian. I am exceptionally proud regardless of where our country is and where I think it ought to be. I'm extremely proud because I know in that trajectory there is an opportunity for all of us to do something. We have created a youth or a generation that has become so complaining that we are not changing the conversation enough. So we should probably try and change the conversation a little bit more. Mr. Noah, we would also be very happy if we don't have to only read about corruption or we only hear news around these big corruption cases from the media, because that creates the kind of atmosphere that we are in now, where people assume that the media is sort of hunting cases down and letting us into things that we don't know. So I look forward to what the team will be doing in that space to make sure that we know more of what the ACC is doing that is beyond just what has gone wrong. I'm a talker by nature, so I'm going to just pause here and do what I am supposed to be doing this morning, Mr. Uira, President of the NCCI. I will pause and call to the podium the Chief Executive Officer of the NCCI, Ms. Charity Muya. Very tough lady, by the way, so let's just hear what she wants to say. And if there's one thing that I know really, really well about Charity, is her position on the issues of corruption. She's very, very strict on that. Even just, you know, like I probably hear a lot about my morning 10-minute late coming. Dr. Hangala, be assured I will be disciplined appropriately and I will also repent appropriately. Please put your hands together for Charity.
I'm challenged now because I must be... Thanks, Danny, for asking and getting there. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Director of Proceedings. I know Danny has asked about my ankle because I drove from the coast last night. I left the coast at about 9 o'clock in the evening. And good news is that when you see a lot of trucks on the road, then you know that Namport is doing fine. But of course, again, it's worrying for us that drive that particular time. So in trying to maneuver to those tracks, whatever, it was cold and all of that, somehow I fractured my knee. But I made it home safely to Court Windhoek. So doctor, it's not because I came late. It's a lady driving by herself. At least some of you are privileged to have drivers driving you. I don't have. But thank you so much. We've been able to gather here. I remember some years back when there was discussion to establish the ACC. I was one of the participants. I was still very young at that time. And I know I was in the group together with the late Dr. Abraham Iyambo. Should we have or should we not have? That was the debate then. And I can proudly actually say that I was one of the people that said we must actually have it in that group.
But we managed, we have the system, the institution is there. And I think so far that gives credit to us as a country that we do have an institution that is trying to address these issues of corruption. And within the HPP2, on the governance pillar, this is what has informed the establishment, or actually the coming into force of this cluster on which NCCI is also a member. And for our directors, of course, that are here are present, a lot is happening behind the scenes that you may not know, and a lot of work does happen. And I think Mr. Noah and my brother there, the ED, deputy, can attest to that. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, even to just get this seminar together. We're supposed to have it earlier in the year. I'm sure probably this was indicated to you in the beginning. And then unfortunately we lost our president, so we had to postpone it. Without further ado, I think Steve mentioned here that it's important that within our institutions we also fight corruption, because as a private sector, we can't just be pointing fingers at government when we don't clean our own houses. It begins with us. There's the corruptor and the corruptee, so it takes two to tango, as the saying goes. And within the chamber, we have actually been doing that as well. Some of the things, the milestones is one of the reasons that I went actually to the coast there. And you will hear some of the milestones that we are doing also within the chamber. Now, from the onset, let me acknowledge that this event came at the right time than ever, when corruption is seen to be rising and seeming to erode the economic and social compact gains achieved over the years. Though Namibia ranks high on the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, as Elena has actually alluded to, 59th globally out of 180 countries and 6th on the continent, there's more to be done so that we arrest the situation to position our economy for sustainable economic growth and development. Our late President, Dr. Hage Geingob, always said that corruption is not good for economic growth and development, as the immediate outcome is loss of trust and, by extension, confidence in the economy, a situation which undermines the effectiveness of socio-economic policies. The IMF, in their Economic Outlook report of April 2019, labeled the impact of corruption on the economy as similar to corrosive damage of the plumbing system, which leads to water leakages. I actually compare corruption to cancer. I don't think any one of us want cancer. It's a serious disease. But it starts slowly, and the symptoms are there, and if you don't address them immediately, obviously, it becomes too late. And I think that's what we really need to do as a country. And Africa actually offers many examples of innovative, unique, and context-sensitive approaches to engage the private sector in anti-corruption efforts. For instance, Ghana's National Anti-Corruption Action Plan offers an awards scheme and is looking into providing tax benefits to companies that enforce anti-corruption measures and demonstrate leadership in the fight against corruption. Other agencies and governments in the region, such as Morocco, are currently discussing implementing a reward system for compliant companies that can be considered when companies bid for public tenders. Doctor has actually made mention here that obviously there was efficiency when they were doing this in-house. It goes, excuse me, maybe we have to look at how do we revise some of these systems, probably also the internal process of those internal boards, because obviously there were companies also that were doing well, but there were others also that were questioned, because you find that there are people who they're in-house and don't know what's going on, and then they inform, their allies. But maybe we have to, also the internal tender boards that are owned by SOEs, that they should be inclusive, as opposed to just having your own people within. The way the tender board, the procurement board is actually comprised, maybe also the internal ones should be the same. We applaud that at the local authority levels, there are some local authorities that even reach out to the private sector that we might be represented on the local tender board. But again, it also befalls on us as the private sector. When these opportunities are available to us, how effective and efficient are we? Right now, I hope all of us have seen this document. Do you have it? It's not just a file. Please read it. Because in there, as a private sector, you should also be able to contact us a chamber on how you want to see, make sure that we assist the anti-corruption collaboratively to actually implement this strategy. Actually, we only have 1 year left to see what we have actually scored on the implementation of this strategy. So from the initiatives captured, 3 common strategic approaches can be identified to underpin effective and impactful engagement. First, raising awareness, guiding and working with the private sector to more effectively address corruption risks. And this is exactly what we're actually doing. Maybe we're not doing it so much, but it will be important to see it also within our workplaces. Are we displaying that the moment somebody enters, you have a display board that says you've entered a corruption-free zone? That should be the first message that we must all do as a private sector within business, especially if you're a member of the chamber. Please, from today onwards, go and put up that board. If you know you're really serious about corruption, you've entered a corruption-free zone. Identifying and providing incentives to companies investing in their compliance programs and demonstrating leadership by actively participating in collective action and public partnerships. This is exactly what the chamber is actually doing. And as NCCCI and the business sector in particular, we see ourselves as key stakeholders in the fight against corruption. These partnership seminar and many other efforts that entrench a zero tolerance to corruption within the business sector governance systems demonstrate our commitments to this cause. We are very cognizant of our influence in shaping socio-economic development as we stand as the conduit of converting resources and factors of production to economic gains. In the same context, we are equally the channel through which government, the single largest player in the economy, takes development to communities as we provide a service in return for payment. As a representative of the private sector, the NCCI is committed to ensure transparency and combat corruption in our country. And as I indicated, we in the private sector are serious about it. And especially at our institutional level, this is something that we are actually demonstrating. As we draw close to the end of this seminar, let me express our deepest appreciation to, in absentia, the Honorable Verinas Nimbo, the Deputy Minister of Aligned Ministry of Trade and Industrialization, for her time, and also for the ministry really giving the support and the message that she has actually been able to actually give to us as a private sector. These are concerted efforts that we need to do together. The well-assembled diverse team of panelists whose insightful knowledge and skills graced and resourcefully enriched this event. This includes our very own president of NCCI, Mr. Bizi Uyurap, our former NCCI president and businessman, retired, but active farmer, Dr. Liake Hangala, Mr. Edward Rodriguez, country chair of Shell, and a consistently committed national corporate member of NCCI. And last but not the least, the renowned corporate governance expert, Mr. Steve Galloway, whom I have actually had the opportunity to work with in various platforms. Thank you very much for actually giving us that insight, and I believe you will remain a resource, very effective resource person, also for the private sector, not just for the blessed work. A special thanks also goes to our moderator and Cluster 4 chairperson, Mr. Danny Mayer, who remains also a very staunch ambassador of the chamber. Many a times when I'm not able to attend these cluster meetings, obviously because I do not have the full structure within me, I would have to send my colleague Antonia, and I know that Danny speaks the voice of the chamber also there. Thank you very much. Let me also acknowledge and particularly gratefully appreciate our strategic partner in this event, the Anti-Corruption Commission, under the able leadership of my brother, Mr. Apollos Noah. Thank you so much, together with your team, really for putting up this event together. We continue to support you in all these efforts because this is not a one-man show. As Dr. said, we must actually be branded ourselves as a country that is actually efficient, that is hardworking, that is corrupt-free. And we need to move in the same direction. Our sponsors, whose contributions went a long way in supporting this event, we're very, very grateful. I'm also thankful to our esteemed attendees who also yielded to the invitations of this occasion, again, proving how relevant and important this topic is to our business life. And I think you deserve to give yourself a round of applause for being there. Our media partners, the media in attendance, we also thank you, as your role in society is pivotal as channels through which information flows. It's also very good that sometimes we also try to send positive messages. We have done our part to bring this engagement or this platform together. It's because we are concerned about corruption, all of us, and should be as such. I know that a lot needs to be done, but it also doesn't stop you from also bringing in some proposals on how we think we can actually do better, because you are also part of the social fabric or members of our society. And as I conclude also, I want to thank our program director, Helena Motseng. Thank you for facilitating this program so effectively as usual. And I want to implore all attendees to optimize on the insightful information gained from this seminar and nurture it in our unique business life. I want to quote our founding father, who once said, always actually the popular quote that we know of him: people united for a common goal will always emerge victorious. These words resonate well with what our society needs today, which is unity of purpose. And together, I know we can do better. Namibia is the only country that we have, and we love it so much. And let's do good for Namibia, for the future of our children, and for the better good of all our people. Thank you so much, and have a blessed day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Muya. Can we put our hands together for Ms. Muya again? Fantastic. I'm excited. I don't know about you, but I'm excited. I'm excited about what I can do. I'm excited about the conversations that I can have when I go back to NDTC. I'm excited about safety moments that I will share around corruption and what that does to all of us and why we shouldn't allow it to take root or to flourish. So I'm really excited. The opportunities that lie ahead of us are so much more than the opportunities that are behind us. And all of us can be that change agent that we ought to be. I think this brings us to the end of our program this afternoon. Thank you so very much for listening to me so kindly. If I can ask you one last favor, if I can ask you to just all stand up. And I'm hoping for this exercise that next to everyone, there's at least one person. If there is a person next to you, I would like you to put your back against their back. Don't face them. In other words, don't face each other. Put your back against the back of the person next to you. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. I don't have this. Do we have one more person? There we go. Okay, so everybody has somebody's back, right? 100%. Can I ask you another favor, please? Please close your eyes. Trust me, nothing will happen to you. So, the person who stands behind you, you have got to have their back. You have to have their back because they're Namibian, just like you. Their interest and their love for Namibia runs just as deep as yours. So when you walk out of this room today, commit to that person and to yourself that you will do your part and that you will play your role, that you will speak up when you ought to, report when you ought to, and most importantly, that you will educate people around the issues of corruption. We've only got this one Namibia, so we don't have a choice. You have got to have each other's backs. And we've got to stop stabbing each other's backs, but have each other's backs, because Namibia is the only one we have. And that's it. After that, we eat. I'm going to remember the one who had your back, Mr. Noah. Ladies and gentlemen, we will close off like we began with our national anthem. So if we would just quickly sing our national anthems, after which refreshments will be served. Our head table, your refreshment is that direction, and the rest of us will be joining our refreshments on that end. Pictures will also be taken during this time. And now, time for the AU anthem and the national anthem. Let us all unite and celebrate together. ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky.